Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Greetings.
Hey, greetings. Good evening, Mr. Walker. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Strange Bedfellows, episode 20, the big 2-0. I'm your host, Lori Spencer, and my co-host from Maverick News, Rick Walker, up there in Canada, where it is Remembrance Day. I hope you're having a good one. That was a great show earlier tonight. Here in the States, we call it Veterans Day, but we're both marking the same anniversary for the same reason, 11/11.
It seemed to me Veterans Day didn't get much, if any, attention today from mainstream media.
I noticed that too. Same here in the States. Not a lot, which is strange because the whole world is exploding into a new world war. Maybe they don't want us thinking about things like that right now. Things like a draft. Things like our kids going off to the Middle East again.
Yeah, hopefully not.
But people are talking about it. And, we're going to talk a lot about, I hate to call them the kids. It seems rude. If I was 22, I wouldn't like being called a kid. I know I didn't like it when I was 22, but I still think of them as kids. When I talk about college students, I think of them as kids. But that's because I'm old. But tonight we have a guest who's a teacher going to talk to us about that. And, you probably already know him. We were very happy to have him back. We're happy to welcome back Tyler McConnell tonight, who is a frequent guest on Maverick News and the original co-host of Strange Bedfellows, my favorite Strange Bedfellow. If you don't already know Tyler, Tyler is a journalist. He's a musician. He's a stand-up comedian. And by day, he's a school teacher in Missouri, which is right next door to where I am here in Oklahoma. He's also a self-described conservative Christian communist. Let that sink in for a moment. A conservative Christian communist. And he's a political activist.
Whatever.
You're losing it, aren't you? He's also a political activist with the Center for Political Innovation, CPI. Our friend Caleb Maupin, we've had them on several times. But, Rick, the war between Israel and Hamas, it's divided a lot of families here in the States and up in Canada, including his own. Tyler was raised by parents who strongly support Zionism. They support Israel in this conflict, but over the years, his views have changed, and he now supports Palestine, and he's going to tell us why tonight. I also want to talk tonight about the generation gap. Remember back during the Vietnam War, they used to talk a lot about the generation gap, right? How the parents just didn't understand why the kids were out in the streets, protesting in support of the enemy, North Vietnam.
Right.
Some of them were. And we see that same thing today happening in this war, quite unlike any war I've seen since Vietnam. There is a definite generation gap between the baby boomers and the Gen Xers who, in every poll, when you look at the demographic breakdown, they overwhelmingly support Israel. No questions asked. And then you've got their millennial kids and their Gen Z grandkids who tend to support Palestine. And the age breakdown is so interesting when you look at a poll and you see that, up to 35% in some polls of the young generation under, say, the age of 30, they tend to strongly support Palestine, but their parents and grandparents, 65 to 89%, depending on the poll, support Israel. So tonight, I'd like to seek to understand through Tyler's experience as an educator himself and a leftist, the ongoing confrontations and the protests that we're seeing on campuses, and the alleged radicalization of students by their teachers, and also through extremist groups such as the Hamas-affiliated National Students for Justice in Palestine, whose activities on campuses in the state of Florida were recently banned at all state universities by Republican presidential candidate and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. College campuses, they've always been bastions of protest and free speech and controversial speech where the young, push the older generations in the direction of the next big social or political reform. But I don't know, Rick, the war in Gaza has changed all of that, I think, to a degree that, for example, I'm a Gen Xer and I was in college when the first Gulf War broke out, and I was very anti-war. We were all out, the student groups were protesting against the war because we didn't want to see the bloodshed. But I don't recall any student groups, at least not on my campus, who were supporting Saddam Hussein. That just didn't happen. So I find this to be very different because now we see some student groups that just openly support Hamas. It's one thing to support the Palestinian people, the innocents who are caught in the crossfire, but some of these groups just openly back Hamas and in some cases are backed financially by Hamas, and Hamas is feeding them teaching materials and training materials and propaganda. So I want to get into that tonight with Tyler, and I think he's getting his stuff set up. I think he's ready. Shall we bring him in? You ready, Tyler?
I'm ready.
Add Tyler to the stage. Welcome back, my friend.
Going?
Hey, good to see you.
You guys hear me okay?
Loud and
Sure
clear.
Can.
Sounding okay, looking okay. I mean,
looking
all
good.
Things considered.
What's for dinner? I see you're in your kitchen.
I'm in the kitchen. Yeah, we tried to go. It's like the scales as a parent with the 3-year-old and the 6-year-old. We can go down in the basement where we get like 2 bars on the internet and hope for the best, or we can be upstairs and have adorable little interruptions here and there. So,
oh, that's cute.
Yeah,
I think
that's what we'll
perfect,
go for.
Because we're talking about the future generations tonight, and we're talking about
there
kids.
You go.
You can bring your kids on the show.
I like the background.
Oh, well, thank you, Rick. Hey, I got something for you, Rick. In case I piss you off too much, I'm gonna put this
Oh, you brought the hat. Yay. I was hoping you'd bring that Canada hat.
You can't get too mad at me with this on.
No, I can't now. No, we're brothers.
America's hat.
That's awesome.
That's just a prelude to the invasion. I know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Coming to invade Canada.
Do you still remember the war?
Country appropriation is what that is, man.
The War of 1812, Rick. I haven't forgotten.
Yeah, well, you just remember, man, we burned your White House once. We can do it again.
I don't know. Well, I probably shouldn't say that because I'm already on numerous lists, but I did have a joke there. I'm not going to say it. But
yeah, I know. I better hold my thoughts on that one, too.
I don't know how much.
What I'm really thinking.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how much. Yeah, we all.
I know. Oh, yes, I know.
You like my kitschy eat sign back there? I swear my mom put that up. Me and my wife deny that we put that up there, but I guess you eat in the kitchen, so.
Well, it's Saturday night. We're just relaxing, taking it easy. It's like having a conversation around the kitchen table with you.
Amen. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Which I would love to do in person, face to face one of these days, since we're neighbors right next door, one state away from one another. Tyler, it's so good to have you back. You've been one of my favorite people. We started Strange Bedfellows together. You were with me for episodes 1 through 4 as co-host. And I love having you back any chance I can. I know you're so busy between
Mhm.
teaching school and being a dad, and also you work as a pharmacy technician on the weekends, right?
I do.
Yeah.
Certified now, certified pharmacy technician, whatever that means.
Oh, congratulations.
You're
That's great, man. That's
welcome.
great.
Thank you.
So I wanted to bring you on tonight with it seems like Veterans Day, Remembrance Day is a good time to have this conversation. And because we are right now looking at a generation of college students who are protesting and asking for a ceasefire.
Mhm.
Because tomorrow or soon, they could be drafted.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a sobering moment. One of my very favorite students from my first year of teaching. Um, they had the Veterans Day assembly on Friday, and I looked up on the board and said his name, and then it said Syria underneath it, and
Hmm.
it was tough for me because
Hmm.
I'll have kids that they kind of feel you out, and then you can tell you become their favorite, and then they tell you like, "Yeah, I'm signing up for the service," and it just hits hard because you see his name and he's there, and so anyway, that was
Mm.
my Veterans Day, but it was interesting when teaching on Veterans Day because this was completely serendipitous. I didn't plan it out this way, but we just finished our persuasive essay unit with a focus on rhetoric and persuasion, and we were listening to Martin Luther King's "Why I Am Opposed to the War in Vietnam" speech. So
Mhm.
we had a Socratic seminar discussing that speech, and then we had just finished reading in journalism John Hershey's Hiroshima, and had
Great one.
watched Grave of the Fireflies, which is a 1988 anime about a 4-year-old girl who starved to death after the firebombing of Kobe, Japan.
Mm.
And man, it was a heavy movie, but the kids liked it and they got why I wanted them to see it, because I feel, Modern Warfare 3 is coming out and all the young teenage boys are excited to kill their friends online.
Mm.
And there's just so much like rah, war propaganda in America that I think it's good to see the after effects of war, of children starving, and you know that experience. It was a true story. The author who wrote the short story, his sister was 16 months old when she starved in Kobe.
My God.
He was 15 and he was running around trying to find her food, and he'd have that moment like, do I eat or do I feed her? And it's just harrowing. And in journalism we watch the news every day, and it just kind of hit home because on the news I know that is happening in the Gaza Strip
In Gaza.
today. There are children starving to death, just like Setsuko in Kobe, Japan. Um,
What?
and
I
there,
forget. Remind me, what grade do you teach?
I teach high school.
High
Yeah,
school.
I
Like,
would never, I would never teach that stuff any younger than 15, 16. That's as low as
yeah.
I would go with it. But
Do you teach
um,
9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade? All of them,
I
or just
I teach I teach ninth grade English and 11th grade English, and then my main electives are journalism and film studies, and those are mostly like 11th and 12th graders. Hmm.
you told me an interesting story the other day, and I was wondering if you would mind sharing it here on the show about we were talking a little bit about the generation gap, and how we haven't seen anything like it really since the Vietnam War.
Hmm.
But we're seeing it big time with this war. We see that the parents, the baby boomers, the grandparents tend to overwhelmingly support Israel,
Hmm.
and yet their kids and grandkids, the millennials and the Gen Z, they tend to overwhelmingly support Palestine, and that kind of
Hmm.
mirrors your own experience in your life, right? Tell me how.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, would you?
I mean, I feel it's funny when it's you because it's how you were raised and it's where you live, and it's like you feel kind of like everyone thinks that way. But I mean, I grew up, my dad is a Baptist preacher.
Right.
My grandpa is, I would say, a Baptist preacher as well. He ran a youth group in the 60s. He was a youth minister. So, I'm steeped in that, and they are incredibly passionate about end times prophecy, and they see what's going on and they just say, "Told you so," more or less is what they say. You know, um, there's nothing that can be done to change it. This is written in God's word, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, down the street, literally, if I could throw, well, I could probably hit it with a rock. There was a church that I was driving to school a few years ago, and out in front of the First Baptist Church, there was an Israeli flag just flying by itself off the front of the church. And I kind of like jostled me, like I live in a town of 5,000 in rural southeast Missouri, and there's just an Israeli, and I knew immediately, what it was. So
We see that a lot around at our churches in Oklahoma too, but it's usually flying next to the United States flag and the state flag of Oklahoma and the Israeli flag, but we don't usually see just one flag of a different country.
Yeah, it's especially on a church, separation of church and state, but
not in Oklahoma.
Not with that one.
Right.
But it's difficult because, I don't know. I've struggled through this, and I think I was on a stream with Caleb and had talked about how I was struggling through this as well, just trying to figure out what I think about it. And I'm still have my finger on the pulse, I believe, and I'm pretty sure the modern day evangelical Christian support for Israel can do no wrong is a psychological operation that has been at work for more than at least 75 years, maybe 100, by British intelligence and the CIA. And I don't have the facts well enough to lay them out, but I have a very strong intuition that that's what's going on. And someone had tweeted back to me, we'll just get this out of the way up front, but someone had tweeted back to me, you should check out True News, TRUNEWS. It's a YouTube channel. They're evangelicals and they are anti-Zionist. And so I checked that out and I was very interested in that. Like, he had an old map of the Bible. He had a Bible that was like 100 years old. And he, when you're a kid, you love the maps the best. You open to the maps and that gets you through the 2.5 hour church service. But he showed the map and there is no Israel. It was just Palestine in the map. Right. So various other points like that he made. Well, I'll just say this before I got on here. I got a phone call from someone very close to me, incredibly close to me, and had watched that channel and just had became livid that man is a false prophet, right? I tried to gently push back. I know you're watching, to the person I'm talking to. I love you. And you just texted me and told me you love me too. But the anger that was brought out in this disagreement amongst evangelicals over Israel, I believe, makes people behave not very Christ-like. And it's like, if you have to choose between support for Israel and behaving like Christ,
it divides Jews as well. I mean, not all Jews are Zionists or supportive of Israel at all.
I watched you guys I watched the video you showed me. I watched it this morning, Lori, of
that's Soviet Palestine.
Yeah, and I kind of felt out you guys' positions, and then I was like, "Uh-oh, maybe I've set myself up for an ambush. I better get that Canada hat out if I'm going to be on there with Rick. I may have to put that old Canada hat on a little bit." But
Soften the blow.
I know, like in indie media, this is what we do. We talk about the thing that's happening right now, right? But like I just talked in our CPI meeting this afternoon, I said, guys, if more than anything, just be kind to people. Yes. I have relatives, like my dad, my grandpa. These are the best men I know who I love to death. And we don't agree on this issue. Okay. But I'm not going to let my disagreements on something happening 8,000 miles away turn me against the people that love me the most. I'm not going to do that. That appears to be what the media is trying to get the whole country to do.
Exactly.
Divide. It's like a binary choice.
Yep.
And, my sympathies, you guys know, I sympathize with the Palestinians. And most of the reason I do that
is tell me why.
Because of what
changed
Jews
your mind?
have taught me.
Yeah.
Norman Finkelstein, Max Blumenthal, Ben Cohen. Her name's slipping my mind right now. Abby Martin.
Abby Martin.
Is Abby Martin Jewish?
I
don't know.
Or partially.
The first three are, I know for sure. Norman Finkelstein, Max Blumenthal, Ben Cohen. Ben Cohen made Killing Gaza, the documentary. Have you guys seen that documentary?
With Max Blumenthal.
Yep. I know Abby Martin made another one about Palestine. I think she made it during the peaceful March of Return, when they were just picked off like flies. Paramedics shot in the leg with sniper rifles, and that's where the Martin Luther King nonviolent protests got the Palestinians. So, but this is the issue of the day, and that's like I told my friend Peter Coffin. I said, just be kind to people, weather this storm, and then here in 6 months, a year, they'll pull out the the NPC chip and put in a new one, and then we can all be friends again. But right now, this is the issue of the day. So
can I get you, Tyler, to I'm interested. Tell me the story.
Okay.
The story that I'm hearing a narrative out there, a storyline. I've been hearing it for a while, but tell me the story in your words that leads you to believe that Palestine is on the right side of this and Israel is on the other side.
Okay.
Or whatever it is, because I just want to get a sense of where you're at with it and whether what I'm going to hear is actually echoing what I'm hearing elsewhere.
Okay. I'd love to tell you. And I will say that as soon as this gets heated at all, I will back away very quickly and be like, hey, I don't know everything about this. This is not an issue that I'm willing to like go to the mat on, I will say, in my heart, it's sick. My heart is sick for the kids and what's going on. And, but people are disagreeing over like very basic facts. Like, was a hospital BOMB'd or not? And which side did that?
And why? Why is the big question, right? Is it a Hamas headquarters or is it just a hospital?
So, I mean, it comes down to, like, I teach my kids in the journalism class. I go, a lot of people, you ask them, where did they get their news? And they just say CNN or NBC or CBS. And I go, no, you need to drill down to people you trust, preferably people that have been there that you trust. So for me, I tend to trust Norman Finkelstein because he's courageous and sticks up for what he believes. And he destroyed his career. He destroyed his career in academia to where I don't even know if he can teach high school. But Noam Chomsky said he was like the most talented scholar he'd ever taught. And because of standing up to Israel, his career's destroyed. He can't teach anywhere. The same with Max Blumenthal. I don't know, I don't know why. I just trust everything else Max has ever told. I've never known Max to lie. And then Max I'm not giving you the story.
But what's the story? Give me the story.
Okay. I think before I give you that story, it would be best just, I mean, do you know what evangelical Christians, like how they're taught about this topic, like how it feels to be raised in that?
I do.
Well, I'm not an evangelical Christian per se, so
I'm hearing the buckle of the Bible belt. I know all about it.
I know some.
I just had a talk with a relative right before I came on here, and they're listening. You know, I'm trying not to point you out exactly, but I love you. And you get this real feeling growing up that if you don't support Israel, then your salvation is suspect, and you're very likely going to burn in hell.
That's what they say.
And you have to support them no matter what, because they're God's chosen people. And if you don't support them no matter what, then Jesus doesn't love you. And they'll go, no. But well, this relative just told me, if you don't support Israel, then you're bringing on the curses of God. And I go, so that means my salvation will be lost? No. I'm not saying that. I'm like, okay, well then what? So that's kind of my base, Rick. Like I was raised like that for 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of resent being treated like that, if that makes sense. So that's like my psychological baseline. When I started it was just kind of in the realm of like learning that I'd been lied to about a bunch of stuff. So I watched a documentary on Waco, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I didn't know about that.
Whoa. On that one.
Okay. Ruby Ridge. Oh, okay. That's one, right? Interesting. And then I watched Killing Gaza by Ben Cohen and Max Blumenthal. And it was like hit me in the gut with the religion I was raised in. Like, oh, like a prosperity gospel type thing. Like, oh, is this just like an imperialist outpost? Is this like what Ronald Reagan's like Secretary of State said, that Israel is our aircraft carrier in the Middle East? Or I believe RFK just said something very similar to that. Like that's 80 to 90% of the world's oil supply is in that region. Right. And if Iran tries to cut off the Strait of Hormuz, then gas is going to triple in price. We can't allow that to happen. We need that oil. And so it just kind of made sense to me that they're using religion to secure their control of the world's oil supply. And in a nutshell, to me, that's what it's about. It's an imperialist move, being very sneakily, shadily CIA think tank. They've really thought this through. They've tried to find what group can we have rock solid support by appealing to their most internal, base, sincere desires for their desire for salvation. We can play on that. We can have rock solid support. And if we play it up from the pulpit long enough, they will never turn their backs on us, no matter what we do. And so that to me is what it seems like. I mean, just from what I've seen, and this was before any of these recent events, like Killing Gaza was made 4 or 5 years ago. You just look at it, it's just bombed out rubble, kids starving. And then Max Blumenthal has very like explosive interviews that he did in like Israeli bars. They've been completely deleted off YouTube. But if you go and like interview like teenage Israelis about what they think of Palestinians, I mean,
right. I've seen those interviews. And on both sides, it's hard to blame the Israeli kids for being raised to hate their neighbor, or the Palestinian kids being raised to hate their neighbor, because that's how long and generations this war between them with pauses has been going on.
Can I just I want to get the story from you though, because when you say you've seen these videos or you've listened to what some of these guys are reporting, what's tell me the story. Like you said you've been lied to, so that's a key thing that I keep hearing people say. We've been lied to all these years. Lied to.
Have you watched the debate between Alan Dershowitz and Norman Finkelstein on Democracy Now! From like 10 years ago?
Don't
Haven't seen that
So
one.
you guys should definitely check that out.
It sounds interesting.
Let me well, I won't put it in the chat, but it's pretty incredible. I mean, Alan Dershowitz wrote a book about Israel and the creation of Israel. And I don't know exactly all the details, but the gist that my subconscious remembers was like things like there weren't any people there really, or like when the Zionists started moving in, that the Palestinians that lived there just left voluntarily. There was no sort of force used or anything like that. Anyway, he had like hundreds of citations of footnotes. So Norman Finkelstein went line by line through every single footnote. And he's debating him live on Democracy Now! And he's like, footnote 437, a flat lie, Dershowitz, He's like, this never happened. Your source is, it's not a primary source. It's like a person told a person told a person, and you cited it as evidence. And I just kept seeing things like that would deconstruct the myth of Israel that I had been taught, and opened up my mind to see things in a different light. Just enough things like that. Noam Chomsky's written about this for years. It's not a new thing. But it's complicated because
It
mainly
is.
of the Holocaust, and I don't. How do I say that? It makes me nervous to go too much into the details about it because I'm not Norman Finkelstein. I haven't went through 1,100 footnotes in Alan Dershowitz's book, but his, I'll be honest, his case convinced me. What he had to say convinced me. And then there's a ton of other people that I deeply respect.
So
I think
what is it that he convinced you of? That what, Israel is behind something?
Oh man. Well,
Or
I mean,
the Zionists are
the
behind
fear that
something?
I feel to say it on the internet is also something, it appears there was a Zionist movement brought about in the late 19th century. I think his name was Herschel or something like that. Wanted to return to the Holy Land. The British said, good, we don't like Jews much around here anyway. And plus, we want to control the Middle East. So, what's it called? The Balfour Declaration.
Balfour Declaration.
We got a nice piece of land here for you. Lawrence of Arabia, that was nice, but we'll give that to you. And you guys start moving in, making settlements, and you got you got all the arms you need. We'll back you up 100%. You just move in there, take care of business, and we'll look the other way. And that way we can get our aircraft carrier in the Middle East. It's but I just find it really interesting that there's also, like you said, it's split even amongst the Jewish people. Like I've seen Orthodox, Hasidic Jewish rabbis who were against the creation of Israel as a state. And it's just so mixed up. Like the fact that I'm saying this online, right? If they can take half of Elon Musk's advertising revenue,
they can take your job. I understand, Tyler, that in this environment, as a teacher, you have to be very careful about what you say and what political positions you take, because right now, as we speak, there are college professors, high school teachers, even elementary school teachers who are being threatened with the loss of their jobs because of their position on the war. And I want to show you an example. I don't know.
And I think people are resentful about that. I mean, I think that's kind of going on too. Like,
yeah,
it's like I can't even talk about this.
Exactly. Right. And I want to show you.
I'm afraid to tell Rick. Rick's asking me a question, and I'm afraid to answer it.
Yes.
Does that mean you're like kind of I guess you are saying that you're not really saying everything you want to say.
Well, I don't know. It's just
I understand if you have to be cautious, and I don't blame you.
I don't know. It's like I think I did say what I wanted to say. I mean, I feel like Israel they've manipulated a lot of people's religious beliefs. I think intelligence agencies have done this to make sure they have a rock solid ally right in the middle of all that oil. I think that's really what's going on. And I think they're willing to use the atrocities that were committed 75 years ago as anybody who says anything remotely like what I'm saying, they're like, well, that guy's a Nazi, and now we don't have to listen to him anymore, which couldn't be further from the truth.
You're saying that the Jews hide behind the Holocaust and use that as a tool.
That is what the critics often say.
Is that fair?
That's one of those questions that,
you're afraid to answer.
And why would I be? I would never be afraid to answer that if you asked me like the Palestinians hide behind the Nakba, so you're afraid to say that, right? Like, but I do think it's good for me to be on here and to hesitate to talk about this because this is honest. It's how people feel. Like to a certain extent, yeah, I think that's going on. I'm not saying it wasn't an atrocity. I mean, I've read Mouse in my classroom. We read Night every year. We read all these books, but it's like Norman Finkelstein said, both my parents were in Auschwitz. I'm still out here saying what Israel's doing to the Palestinians is awful. So, but he can say that. I can't. I'm just a white guy in the middle of the country.
But saying that cost him everything.
It cost him everything. And that's why I respect him. Because when I see somebody who gave everything for a viewpoint against their own in-group, I mean,
I do respect that.
That's
about
Martin Luther King getting shot on the balcony for me. I mean, that's it's one of the most Christ-like things I can think of, where you completely sacrifice your own personal comfort to tell the truth about something wrong that you feel your own people are doing.
Let me ask you something, Tyler. As a teacher, school teacher yourself, I don't know if you've been following all the various controversies on not just college campuses, but elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. This is what happened in Oakland, California on Friday. Take a look.
Demanding an apology after they say the Oakland Teachers Union took a controversial stance on the Israel-Hamas war.
Jewish parents feel actions taken by the union encourage anti-Semitism.
ABC 7 News reporter Tara Campbell heard from some of those families.
Dozens of Jewish families, teachers, and allies rallied outside Montclair Elementary Friday, speaking out against a resolution passed by the Oakland Education Association earlier this week.
We are all united to urge the OEA to rescind this inflammatory and dangerous resolution.
There are still some amendments to the resolution yet to be finalized, but the OEA tells us the resolution endorses Palestinian liberation, encourages teachers to participate in pro-Palestinian demonstrations, and calls for a ceasefire.
I have a hard time understanding why a teachers union or a school board thinks they should be creating resolutions around one of the most complex international conflicts, when even global leaders currently cannot agree on a resolution.
Members of the American Jewish Committee, the ADL, and Jewish Community Relations Council were among those who spoke, calling on the OEA to reverse the resolution and apologize.
It is blatantly anti-Semitic. It is wrong.
The OEA responded by pointing us to an earlier statement posted on social media. It reads in part, "Our union unequivocally condemns anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We call for the release of hostages held by Hamas. We mourn the loss of life, and we add our voices to a growing collective calling for a ceasefire."
I think it's really powerful when unions take a stand for teachers, for workers' rights. and issues affecting students and teachers in school everywhere.
Yahia Kaji is a high school teacher at OUSD and says he supports the resolution.
When we talk about taking a stand in support of Palestine and a ceasefire, we're talking about Palestinian students. We're talking about Palestinian schools that have been destroyed by the Israeli military.
Meanwhile, back at the rally, parents take to the podium with a plea.
We are afraid to send our kids to school. We are afraid to wear a Jewish star. We are removing mezuzahs from our doors.
Tara Campbell, ABC 7 News.
Happening where I live. You could wear a Jewish star or Palestinian flag, and most of the kids are going to have no idea what that is. So,
Is that right?
yeah.
I think some of this may be a generation gap thing, but I have a question.
Yeah, no, I'm here to answer questions. I will say the question Rick asked me earlier where he's like, so are you saying the Jews are hiding behind the Holocaust? It kind of felt like asking like, so you're saying it's okay to say the N-word in the classroom? It's like a similar type. It has nothing to do with each other, but it's set up as like this issue where you're like record scratch. You know what I mean? You're like, I'm just
I bring it up. I bring it up, Tyler, because we are seeing a real rise in anti-Semitism, a real rise. Well, and Islamophobia as well. And I've just been observing, for quite some time, this narrative that has been spun, especially within, I would say, the freedom movement, QAnon.
Okay.
And I'm just one, and a lot of people are being pulled in this direction with this narrative, and the language is pivoting. It's changing. And I'm looking actually here on my phone for a clip that somebody sent to me, and I'm hoping I can find it, that will very clearly and illustrate my point, if I can find it at some point. And I'm not in any way trying to attack you. I'm really trying to explore this because it's
I'll put the Canada hat on. I got it somewhere.
I
should have put it on. I missed the golden
That's your
opportunity.
battle armor.
Right when you asked me that question, like, are the Jews hiding behind the Holocaust? I should have went.
It's a clip from a show, and I can't remember the name of the show, but I'll find it at some point. You guys continue on, and
well, I was
just going to say my question
in this, you want to be like, oh, that's not me, but it sounds like, well, I have a lot of black friends. That's what it sounds like. But I mean, a lot of the people that I got into alternative media through was like the reason I went into journalism was because of Noam Chomsky. Am I like, well, he's a Jew, so I don't, and then the people that made me want to be in alternative media were Max Blumenthal, Ben Cohen, the people that made me excited about being a teacher or a professor, Norman Finkelstein. I mean, it's not, I feel like they're conflating like criticizing what the state of Israel is doing as, I believe, like an imperialist outpost of the United States. I mean, they literally said that's our aircraft carrier in the middle of the East to control the oil supply with, oh, well, you hate Jewish people. And it's just not true. And I feel that's unfair. And when I see some sentiment like that, I think, okay, this has been created by an intelligence agency to control the population in some way to get what they want.
Ever occur to you, Tyler, that maybe it's not just the CIA doing everything? Whenever I'm talking to anybody
really
about
unfair,
any of this
Rick.
stuff, no, man.
Man.
Everything's the CIA's fault. Everything. And I'm not saying the CIA doesn't do some pretty nasty stuff, but everything, it's always the CIA. It's always controlled opposition, or it's always some excuse. And it's always the CIA. Is it ever anybody else? Ever?
But that's my intuition, and I think it's true. But I mean, you can say that if you want to.
I'm just, when you sit back and you look at, what does this action, who does this benefit, and who benefits from that? Who benefits from mass immigration? Who benefits from these various actions? and you sit back and, some of this stuff, if you just, I have yet to sit on a program in the past probably 3 years and ever hear anybody blame any intelligence service other than the CIA. It's always the CIA.
No,
every single time.
When I say the
well,
CIA,
something
I
went
mean
wrong.
the Mossad.
It's the
I mean
CIA. There was a war. That's the CIA. If
any
there's a
of
war
them.
here, there's a war there. It doesn't matter where the war is. It's always the CIA. Hell,
Because
the
it
CIA
usually
is trying
is.
to take over Canada. The CIA's taking over the whole world. It's always the CIA. And the CIA is responsible for some pretty terrible things.
I think they're the best at
some
it.
very, very direct evidence that shows, in specific instances, absolutely the CIA. But I'm just saying, maybe people can open their minds a little bit more and think that maybe there are other countries involved as well. These kinds of operations are not exclusive to the CIA. Now, I shouldn't say that, it's always the CIA. There are some other media outlets out there, but not on this side of the political fence, not within the circles that I move in, not even with you, right? Not with the freedom movement. It's always over here on this side, always the CIA. It's never anybody else. It's always the CIA, or in Canada, occasionally it's CSIS, and it's always the same thing. It's like whenever they want to blame somebody or they can't figure something out, must be the CIA. And all it takes is somebody to say, it's the CIA. And then everybody goes, oh, of course it is. It's like no evidence. It's just the CIA. But it's just a go-to. But we're never going to get to the truth about things if it's always just CIA. And when I'm looking at what's going on and I've been listening to this narrative be spun up. I was getting sucked in early on during the pandemic. That's when all this stuff really started to ramp up. And I'm going to try and find you the clip to show you where it all goes in the end. Okay, Tyler, and this is why the people, on the left are, and I'm not taking a side. I haven't taken a side on this issue. I really haven't, because I just want the killing to stop. But I'm seeing propaganda on both sides. I'm seeing it ramped up heavy on both sides. I see fake crap online. I got sucked into a bunch of videos myself that I thought were real that it turned out not to be, from both sides. And you can't tell me that, other countries don't have interests in the Middle East as well. It's not just the United States. It's a lot of countries. Every country in the world has interests in there. And every political entity is out there looking out for their own best interests. And it's the law of the jungle out there in the international world. Right? It's like, who's got the most guns? It's a bunch of gangsters who run all these different countries, and they're all pitted against each other, and they're going to do whatever it takes to win. And we are at war. This is a third world war, and it's being fought in completely different ways now. It's absolutely an information war. Absolutely. And as I've seen this pandemic, when that broke out, everything changed. That was the moment when a lot of this rhetoric, this narrative really got roots. And, it's like, what is the story? The story that we've been told is that you've been lied to. You've been absolutely lied to. And everything you thought you knew is a lie. We've been going through a long process of having our history rewritten, especially here in Canada and in the United States. Statues torn down, religious institutions undermined. And as a result of all of that, when the pandemic hit, you've got all of these people who have been, watching the internet, and they're getting this whole story. And what's the story being? The elites are controlling everything. You've got this new world order coming in, and what are these elites doing? They're controlling banking. They control all the money. They control all the wars. They don't care about you. They're trying to kill you with chemtrails and pharmaceuticals. And who controls the pharmaceutical industry? The elites. It's all the elites. And that's what we've been fed a steady diet of for over 3 years now.
But then the narrative began to change. They started to identify who the elites are.
These elites. And the elites are the Jews. That's who it is. It's the Jews.
Darjuden.
Well,
Darjuden.
you know, my friend Caleb Oppen calls blaming the Jews as what did he call it? It's like Marxism for dummies, is what he calls it. Like where you go, oh, you're talking about Wall Street. I know who you're really talking about. So you can't really do a class analysis of like there are people in this world who want the oil supply, and you know, don't say the CIA, say the intelligence agencies. To me, this as a Marxist, this is a class war. CIA stands for capitalism's invisible army. If you don't want it to be in Langley, it can be in Mossad, it can be French intelligence, it can be British intelligence, it can be. But I think they want that oil, and they are willing to play on people's religious beliefs and manipulate the media to make sure that they get it.
And speaking
Otherwise,
of Caleb,
I don't know how my relatives could be okay with, like, you know, children being blown up. It doesn't make sense from a Christian worldview.
speaking of our friend Caleb and the media, I don't know if you saw him, but Thursday night he was out on the streets of New York City covering the huge pro-Palestine protests. And you've probably seen this clip. I don't know. I'll play it for you. But we get a glimpse of Caleb out there in the middle of this melee, covering it all for RT.
Want to do a stand-up? Yeah, okay. All right. I'm ready. You need the card? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. 3, 2, 1. Now, as you can see, some of the protesters got their hands on this New York City.
Oh, sorry. It's Tulsi and Perilla tea.
Thank you so much. I don't know if they're going to be happy that this is on the card.
Okay.
This might be a bad look. It's okay, we're going to finish.
Oh, Rick, I hate to say this, Rick, but you know who that looks like to me? The CIA.
I'm sorry, were you talking to me? Because I was trying to queue up a clip.
Yeah, he was talking to you, Rick.
Oh, man.
Tyler said it was the CIA.
But I slowly put the Canada hat on while I said it to try.
I'm not trying to defend
avoid.
the CIA. I'm just trying to get to the truth.
Heavens, no.
No,
It's just like
I just felt it was unfair. I felt like you thought that is the depth of my analysis. Like anytime something goes bad, I just say it's the
I was
CIA.
speaking broadly about everything I'm
Okay.
hearing from people. This is always like, it's always the same thing. It's like in the freedom movement, it's always like, anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's more complex than always the same answer.
Well,
No,
that's
absolutely.
exactly why I chose you tonight, Tyler. Caleb and I have talked about it. In fact, one of the things I love about you and Caleb and the people at CPI is you're my favorite commies, I always like to say, because you're actually reasonable, intelligent people who don't engage in this kind of crazed binary thinking that, you must hate the Jews if you support
No.
Palestine.
Marx was a Jew.
Exactly. It's a very
Doesn't make
complex
any
thing.
sense.
And you have to be fluent in your history. Caleb is a great historian himself. He's a history teacher. He's also very fair because he understands the role that anti-Semitism played in, post World War I Russia, during the Russian Civil War, the pogroms, and everything that led to the Holocaust. And I need to point out that video we just looked at was from Thursday night, which just happened to be the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht, which, of course, was the Nazi pogrom that went on for 2 days. And it was the beginning of the Holocaust. Now, I took offense at that video when I saw, I don't mind them protesting. I don't mind them getting out in the streets and waving their flags and doing their chants. But on that particular day, did they have to go smashing windows? Because that tripped a wire inside of me. As a historian, I see that as an obvious, either total lack of sensitivity to the Jewish people and how Jewish people would interpret the busting of windows. And we did see a lot of busting of windows all across parts of Europe on the anniversary of Kristallnacht. And yes, we saw it right there with the busted out window of that cop car and some shop windows in New York City. And then they come back and claim they're not anti-Semitic. Okay, well, are you just dumb? Do you not know what Kristallnacht was? Or do you just lack sensitivity? And that's why I love you and Caleb, because you don't lack sensitivity. You're sensitive to both sides. And, you're sensitive to the feelings of Jewish people when they see something like that.
I would be amazed if there probably were like edgy Jewish kids in that protest.
There were.
Yeah. So I guarantee they weren't thinking about the historical relevance of Kristallnacht.
I don't even think they know it, Tyler. They're just mad.
They're mad. They want to destroy some stuff.
Do you think that they're mad at mom and dad? Do you think that this plays some role?
A psychological idea? I was trying to think through my own psychological impression of this, and I do feel for the millennials, I think it has something to do with us becoming politically aware during the George W. Bush era. Absolutely. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's just we have like a knee-jerk gut reaction to sort of like overt, right-wing, not right-wing, Republican. It's just whatever was big at that time. It was like that's when we came of age and became political. And, Israel's in that sphere. And
makes sense.
I think in a way, as our generation, it's like we resent not being allowed to talk about that, or we're afraid to say what we think, like we've talked about, because horrible things can happen to you.
Well, speaking of George Bush, I have a clip right here of George Bush that I brought just for tonight, because I think, as I was just saying, a lot of these kids aren't being taught their history. A lot of these kids, if you stopped a kid at that protest last night and said, "Hey, what was Kristallnacht?" they'd look at you like you had two heads. And the question is, Tyler, is our children learning?
Rarely is the question asked, is our children learning? As yesterday's positive report card shows, children do learn. when standards are high and results are measured.
Well,
now that was in the year 2000 is when he said those infamous words, "Is our children learning?" So that was 23 years ago. And those kids are now in college, and they're going to the schools like Harvard, like Columbia, like your local university. And if you look, I'm going to play you a little footage from last night in New York City. You know, these protests just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Last night, they shut down Grand Central Station. They had to lock the doors to keep the protesters out. And it was absolutely huge. But look at the average age, and you'll see that most of these are college kids.
charged with disorderly conduct.
Well, it looks like some of my students are in the chat, so no pressure there. Hey, but your comment looked just like what you'd say in class, buddy, so I love you. If that's you, you're the man.
Well, I found the clip, but I'm afraid to run it.
Oh, yeah? Is it that bad? It's going to get us all in hot water?
It could.
Just want to tell me about it? I'll believe you.
Well, here.
It's up to you, man.
Let me bring it up here. And it's long, so I'll give you just a little bit. I keep clicking on the wrong thing here. There we go. Okay. You know who Chris Guy is?
No.
Okay. Very.
You're
popular.
playing a Rumble video on YouTube. That's a dangerous idea.
It is, and for that reason, I'm gonna dump off YouTube.
Okay.
Off my YouTube anyway. Laurie, if you're listening, you may want to do the same.
I'm gonna do it too. Hang on, let me remove it. How do I do that? Remove. Let's see. Remove this destination from the stream. Okay, remove. Hey, it's peace out. You guys want to watch the rest? Anybody watching on my channel? Find Maverick News on Rumble. I love y'all. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, so a lot of people follow Chris Sky. A lot of people believe what he's saying here. He's been participating in this process of, do not comply. Everything you've been told is a lie. It's the story that I shared with you previously. It's the elites, right? Well, just within like the last, week and a half, the language has changed. And I've taken note, and he's not the only one. Yeah, and here, what you see, I'm in the belief that the Jews are in the right. Okay, whatever. I won't read all the comments here. Let me just roll some of this. He goes on. He's got this whole narrative down with the new language, and the language really now, instead of elite, it's the Jews.
Says that land belongs to people that practice the same religion as them 3,000 years ago. Let's get that straight too, by the way. Remember, I said that because when we talk about Catholicism, Buddhism, Islam, it's a religion. It's not a race. So how all of a sudden did Jewish become a race? It's not. It's a religion. They have books called the Torah, books called the Talmud. So how can it be called a race? The only reason they pretend that Jewish is a race is because that is the only reason that they can have claim to land in Palestine. Meanwhile, any Jewish person who has claim to ancient Israel 3,000 years ago would be Arab. They would be dark-skinned. They would speak Hebrew and Aramaic. They would not look like Benjamin Netanyahu, who's whiter than Charlie and me from Eastern Europe. Those are called Eastern European Khazars who converted to Judaism around 800 years ago. They have absolutely no blood ties and no ancestry to Israel. So that entire idea that this land belongs to them is absolute hogwash. And the entire idea that Jewish can both be a race and a religion is also hogwash. There is no such thing in the world that can be a race and a religion. And we know it's a religion, and we know that the people that are living there now have converted to that religion. They weren't the ones that started that religion. Because I'm sorry, you're not Arab. And that's what a Semite is, by the way. A Semite is somebody from the Middle East, someone of Arab ancestry. So when they call you an anti-Semite, That doesn't even apply to 99.9% of the Jewish people living in Israel today. A Semite is an Arab who spoke Aramaic, Hebrew, or one of the other ancient languages that I can't even recall right now. But that's a lesson in history for you, ladies and gentlemen. Not a lesson in falsified religion, not a lesson in media propaganda, a lesson in actual facts. And that's why they don't want me talking, because when I say these facts, it makes some people uneasy because they're learning all this new stuff. Well, you know what makes the most uneasy? The people that have been lying to you for the better part of 100 years. Because now people have already known in their gut this is wrong. How the hell can Israel be getting away with all this? Now people are no longer afraid to speak up. Now the term anti-Semite doesn't work anymore. Now even people in the USA are starting to lose support for Israel. So it's getting to that point where Israel is going to be all on their own. But guess what, guys? They have a plan for all of us. You know what Israel's big plan is if the United States allows anybody to invade it? They already told everybody. They're going to blow us all up with nuclear weapons. Did you know about that? It's a very well-known fact that Israel has miniaturized nuclear weapons. They call them suitcase nukes. And you know what Israel said? They went out into the open, into the international community and said, we are now holding the entire world hostage. We believe that we are in danger and people might want to invade us because of all the bad things they've been doing to everybody. So what did Israel say? Israel has told every country around the world that they have planted a nuke in your embassy, in your home country. And the moment anybody sets foot in Israel, they call it the Samson option, and you could look this up. Israel is threatening to detonate simultaneously every single nuclear weapon that they have hidden in every single country around the world. Basically, telling the world that you're going to fight our wars for us, you're going to let us have supremacy, or we're going to take you all with us. Imagine Russia or China or any country in the world trying something like that. It would be at the forefront of the international conversation until those people were handled at every level of international law. But when Israel does it, we don't even talk about it. And in fact, me even mentioning it, I'm going to get attacked. I'll be called an anti-Semite because, Israel planting nukes everywhere is just them self-defense, right? Like everything else they're doing. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do we have? We have, for the last 70 years, millions of people being killed in the name of genocide, all their land being taken in the name of genocide. Well, they're being telling everybody that they're the victims perpetrating the genocide. It's not very hard to see what the problem is. And now it's even easier to know what the solution is. Everybody keeps pretending like it's so hard. So many international people, Minister of Spain said this, all these people around the world in government positions saying the exact same thing that I'm about to tell you now. I'm a smart guy. I might even be considered a genius, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out what the solution would be here. It's pretty simple, guys. Number one is a ceasefire. And wouldn't you know it? They ordered a ceasefire at the UN, but the United States used their veto power to now make it legal for Israel to go on and keep murdering people, even though the international community said, stop right now. The United States said, no, but we're going to let them do it. So that's where we are right now in the international community. What do we need to stop this? A ceasefire. We need Israel to define its borders as it has refused to do over the last 70 plus years as it keeps expanding them. Once those borders are defined, then they can remove their illegal military blockade over the Palestinians. Palestinians can then be granted statehood so they can have all the international law protections of every other nation. At that point, Hamas could be dismantled because there won't be need for a military armed wing because there won't be any more invasion coming. So imagine that. Imagine there was a ceasefire. Imagine Israel was forced to actually declare its borders. And imagine Israel was forced not to block food, water, electricity, building materials, and everything else a sovereign nation needs to provide for itself and expand its economy and increase the standard of living of its people. Do you think Palestine, you think if Israel keeps saying they want a two-state solution, all we want is the Palestinians. You think if Israel brought what I just said to the table, the Palestinians would be like, no, we don't want it? Of course not. They'd be all over that in a heartbeat. But Israel, the last thing Israel wants is a two-state solution. So they will do everything in their power to keep this war going, including false flag attacks. I wouldn't be surprised if we get another terror attack soon to be blamed on nasty Arabs that's really done by Israeli Zionists.
Chris. Man, does you ever stop going? That guy hurts my ears and my brain. That's the same Chris Guy who was on with Stu Peters, who's a known, Nazi anti-Semite, saying that we needed extreme accountability, like a gun to the head for our leaders. And what's crazy is those talking points that he was just giving are echoed by a lot of people on the right and the left. I see people on the left retweeting Stu Peters here lately. They're singing from the exact same hymnal as the outright neo-Nazis, which is really weird if you don't understand where it all comes from and how this intricate web is weaved. And you have to understand some history to get that. And a lot of our young people, Chris Guy, bless his heart, he just, I don't know, fell asleep in history class or something. But what a lot of people don't know, and they should know, I guess it's not being taught, which is why we're having this conversation tonight about education and what is our children learning, is that from the early 1930s, all the way through the Second World War, the Palestinian Arabs, the Palestinian Liberation Movement, and many Arab countries were allied with Nazi Germany, strong allies. There were Waffen-SS units, and lots of them, about 20,000 of them in Palestine and throughout Arabia. This is the part of history that these kids do not know. But
You're
what they're being
Nazi symbols being shown at pro-Palestine rallies. You are seeing outright Nazi ideology displayed as part of this conflict. The narrative is that, and again, it's designed to deflect. So, I'm having a real hard time with the idea that October 7th happened. But of course, that fits very nicely into this narrative. Oh, they let it happen because what they really wanted was an excuse to go into Gaza to exterminate the people, push them all out, and take the land. No proof of that. It's just like was 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. The same thing is, what that narrative is.
Well, it's George Galloway said yesterday. He put out a very controversial tweet that is, to many people, tantamount to Holocaust denial.
And here's the Stu Peters. Here's one of many clips from Stu Peters that I found alarming. I did a whole show about this guy.
Yeah, that's weird.
Chris
so we talked as we exited the last segment that we were going to start talking about what accountability looks like. Okay, because I want to go on the record again and just say the people that have perpetuated these crimes against humanity, when they're found guilty in a court of law, should be executed. They should be hanged or shot in the brain. These people should face.
They should definitely face the ultimate.
This is
extreme accountability.
Yeah. That's about the vaccines. But he also talks about Israel, Palestine. He comes right out, and I've got other clips here from various videos that he's done. He doesn't like the Jews, man. This guy does not like the Jews.
Hey,
and
Rick.
And then if you listen to the narrative that's being spun now, see, there's more than one kind of Jew, apparently. There are basically 4 different types. There's like the religious Jew. There's the Khazarian Jews or Ashkenazi. There's the Jews by marriage, right? And then there's a 4th kind. They've got them all sort of divided up. And then there's the Gentiles. So they're just as much to blame because the Gentiles are Zionists who are controlled by the Jews. And their people are like, they're your garden variety pedophile, which is at the core of the whole QAnon movement, right at the very center of it. You can look that stuff up. It's all about pedophilia.
Hmm.
And so they go after the pedophiles, the people that go to Epstein Island, and they blackmail those guys. And then they control them, and they're the Gentiles. And they're Zionists. So really what it comes down to now is it's not just like your average Jew. It's like any Zionist is fair game now. And it's, any Jew is basically a Zionist, or anybody else they point their finger at, and they can say, well, that guy's a Zionist, that guy's a Zionist. And it's fear, 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 fear porn. It's really the age-old anti-Semitic tropes that we've heard for generations over and over again. It's the exact same rhetoric that we heard in Nazi Germany. It's just that it was disguised with new kinds of language. There is, it's anti-Semitism without the Jews. But now they're coming right out and they're not hiding it anymore. They're saying the word Jew, and they're dividing it into different categories of Jews so that it's a little more palatable to people. And everything, it's the same old story. It's not just that it's not elite bankers, and it's not elite politicians. It's not the elites who just control the pharmaceutical industries. It's the Jews. Now it's just, he's coming right out, and he's not the only one.
Well, when Kanye West said it, when Kanye West said it, a whole generation of kids thought it was cool.
And see, people on the left side of the political spectrum are particularly vulnerable right now to being sucked into this narrative, because the oppressed versus the oppressor narrative is very intoxicating, right? Who's being oppressed here more? Is it the Jews? No, because that whole thing about the Holocaust, they're just using that. That was never as bad, they would say, as they made it out to be. And they just use that as a shield. And that attack on the 7th, that was their own damn fault, because look, they're lying to you, obviously, because they have such a great security system. There's no way they could ever possibly get past it. So obviously they let them come in and kill their own people, which is just horrific, because they're monsters, and actually probably even aliens if you're in the QAnon rabbit hole. And it's so monstrous that they just were using it as an excuse so they can go in and commit genocide on the Palestinians. And that's what's going on. And that's why they're bombing all the people in there. And, and Tyler, I mean, I'm still even not taking sides on this, because it's horrific what has been done. Right. Okay. Because I see on the other side, there's rhetoric back the other way too. Right. There's rhetoric back the other way.
What would you say? What would you say to Norman Finkelstein?
May not be, a lot of that. There's fabrication. I'm seeing it on both sides, but this anti-Semitic stuff I'm pointing out because I'm really concerned about it, because it's an echo of history. It seems like we're already maneuvering down that road. It seems very dangerous. We've got somebody in California who was killed on the street at a protest. We've got just today.
His name was Paul Kessler.
That's
Remember
right.
His name was Paul Kessler.
I think
we've got
this is
a leader from the
generational.
Jewish community in Detroit who was stabbed. The suspect was released from custody. It was either yesterday or today. This is, all of this is ramping up. And I see Islamophobia on the rise as well. Everybody's very divided. This is more divisive than any issue I've seen to date. This is a terrible thing that's happening. And it's the rhetoric on both sides that's so inflammatory, so polarizing, and people are just at each other's throats over this. It's the most disgusting thing I've seen in my lifetime. And it's the most dangerous thing all the way across the board. We have to find a better way. This is terrible. On both sides. I'm not sitting here saying I've got the answers, but what I've seen with this narrative, they were sugarcoating this stuff for 3 years, using changed language. It's the elites for this, but it's the same things. You see, now people are so angry that they're going to go after these Jews, the Zionists, the Gentiles, because they're being blamed for everything. Inflation, the wars, because it's bankers' wars. The narrative that everybody's dying because of the thing in the arm. And who's to blame for that? The Jews. Because why? Because they control the pharmaceutical industry. They also control the media. They've been lying to you for 100 years. Oh, by the way, you show me proof that suitcase nukes actually exist, and then we can talk. Okay. And there's a lot of other stuff in what Mr. Sky was presenting in that video, where he's also talking about pedophilia, children being murdered, their organs being harvested. I think he gets into the whole, the blood being consumed as well, and all of that stuff. And then you look up adrenochrome, and that'll take you right down the rabbit hole into the center of the whole QAnon conspiracy culture as well. Okay. You go look up adrenochrome. Have you ever heard of adrenochrome?
Yeah,
I've heard of it. It comes from babies, right?
Apparently, yeah. Adrenochrome allegedly is a substance that is produced at the highest moment of terror that a child experiences just before they're murdered, so that their blood can be consumed. And the adrenochrome is then harvested for the elites, to have injected into them, so that it's like the fountain of youth, essentially.
That's what they say that Joe Biden is taking. So obviously it doesn't work. But
and so
it doesn't work.
I don't mean to conflate this stuff, because I'm not. This stuff is all connected. It's all part of this whole thing. It's a consistent narrative across the board. You don't believe me? Go watch more Stu Peters. Go watch more of these guys. Look at the network of the people involved, and it all ties in together. Now, there's another layer of media that is determined to appear to be more credible, hence your Max Blumenthal's. Okay. But really they contribute to this same anti-Semitic trope, but it's not. But what this is,
so he's a self-hating Jew.
It's anti-Semitism without really the Jews. I have an article actually that it's actually a very in-depth study looking at this aspect of anti-Semitism. It's sort of, I would call it sort of a neoliberal woke version of anti-Semitism that is so dangerous, because it allows the people who perpetrate this new version of an age-old tale to really point the finger at anybody that they decide to point the finger at, to target for extreme accountability.
Okay.
Well, we hear that also on the left, Rick. And my dear friend, George Calloway, is in a tub of hot water because of a tweet that he put out yesterday. And I was going to ask you if you can find it, to put George's tweet up on the screen. Now that we're off of YouTube, I think I can read it out loud. But
are you off YouTube, Lori? Because I see people commenting on YouTube.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm not worried about my channel. I'm worried about your channel. I'm going to go ahead and keep mine up on YouTube.
Okay.
Take my chances.
Bring up George Galloway's Twitter account here for you, Lori, and
it's a tweet that he put out yesterday that got him in so much hot water with the Jews. The Jerusalem Post is comparing it to atrocity denial. And I don't know.
Scroll down. I don't know.
The tweet may have been removed. A lot of people have reported the tweet as hate speech and Holocaust denial, etc. Let me see if I can find a screenshot for you.
And Tyler, I mean, I hear also rhetoric on, the Israeli side as well, where they talk about the Palestinians as monsters, right? Subhumans. This is, for me, also equally disturbing. And I see war crimes being committed on both sides. They talk about possibility of Nuremberg 2.0. Usually people in the freedom movement refer to that as a consequence of the jabs, right? But I see Nuremberg 2.0 potentially happening in the future. And if that happens, you know, both sides should be hauled up in front of a jury or a tribunal, as far as I'm concerned, because they're doing unspeakable things.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm interrupting a good fight on my own show, but I feel like I'm losing control of my show here, guys.
Fighting. I'm not fighting. I don't mean to fight. I'm just. I'm
I'd like
really
to talk
worried
about George Galloway.
Oh my goodness.
I am too.
We
but
talked
I would
about
really
this
like
in
to
the
talk
CPI
about
meeting today, that like the fact that this is being shown is a little suspect to us as well. Like how
what
is
is
this?
this? You know, you remember the
like,
pandemic?
well,
Remember the pandemic? Look
how
at
are
this.
they letting us watch this? Do you know what I mean? Why is this everywhere?
Yeah, look at this. I mean, and you look at the network of
I
journalists.
tell you what, I'm going to let you
okay?
two gents talk, and I'll be back.
Remember the pandemic when they were showing like mass grave, New York City, right? And I was like, come.
Well,
and it wasn't really accurate, because it was like that's where they would always bury homeless people, and then aerial shots, and this is propaganda.
They won't
I look
show
at the network of
soldiers' caskets
journalists
coming home
Sorry,
from
what's
the
that?
war. I mean, they won't show soldiers' caskets coming home from the war. But this is in the feed completely. And I don't know. You know, if I put on my is it a gang counter gang type thing? I mean, is it
it's information warfare, man. And it's like, well, how do we even know if some of this stuff that we're being shown is even real? So a lot of this stuff could be staged on both sides. That's why I've stopped showing a lot of clips, because I've been burned. Like there was footage of paratroopers in parachutes coming in. They showed the paragliders, the hang gliders thing. I don't even know if that's true. But the footage of the guys coming in on parachutes, absolutely false. That was later shown to be footage from another country at a sporting event, where they cut the shots of the guys dropping from the sky. Nothing to do.
So what do you think the point of it is? Do you have an intuition of where you think this is heading, or why the media is being manipulated in this way?
I think that you just have a number of countries involved. I think NATO never should have pushed up against Russia. They poked the bear, right? Too much. It became too much of a threat to Russia. Now we're not just on the verge of a third world war, we're immersed in a third world war. But Russia doesn't need to attack the West with conventional arms. They're at war with us through the information war. And Canada is definitely a country that is in play. The objective, really, using this kind of information warfare, is not to take a direct approach. They don't create the problems. They identify problems and then add fuel to the fire. They fan the flames to create disruption, to create as much disruption as possible. The objective really is to undermine public confidence and trust in institutions, and to undermine support for the war effort. By undermining public support for the war effort in North America and in the West, they lose support. The governments here lose support for the funding. You cut the funding, they win the war.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
right?
I don't know. I might be on the side of those who want to cut support for the war effort.
And that's fine. But, I just think that people need to understand that a lot of these psychological techniques that are being used are very sophisticated. It is a psyop, and it's hard to understand who's behind the messages that you're receiving, because it can actually be several players, including the CIA, because the CIA has an interest in a lot of what's going on as well. So a message coming here or a message coming from there, even about the same stories, could be coming from multiple sources to try to achieve slightly different results. And these guys are at war. It's like a snowball. You start with a snowball, a piece of information, and one side will start rolling that information snowball down a hill, and it gets speed, gains momentum, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as it's identified by other intelligence agencies, they can inject counter narratives and try to deflect it or redirect it. But they have a network of people, some of whom are paid, others are not. Others are just, they latch onto it, and they may even believe what they've seen, and then they repeat the narrative over and over again. And the more people that can latch onto it organically, the more credibility that information snowball has. If you go back and look at Yuri Bezmenov in the 1980s, there are videos of him online talking about exactly how this kind of information warfare is waged. Now, that was back in the 80s, but you can take those exact same techniques and overlay them, or use them as the foundation, and then overlay today's technology, and it becomes even more powerful. There's also, MK Ultra, which is an actual thing. It's a real thing. The experiments were actually done, a lot of them right here in Montreal. There's a lawsuit in Canada from the families of the people affected by that, who literally lost their minds because they were subjected to shock therapy after being administered doses of LSD and kept in comatose states while they were fed like all these crazy stimulus and messaging. Today, they don't need, they've legalized marijuana. They're encouraging the use of LSD recreationally here in Canada and probably in the US as well. The CBC does it. You don't need the subject present anymore to involve them in the experiment or in the therapy or the subversion or the mind game. They can target an individual online now with very specific kinds of information. Just one video, just keep putting it into somebody's loop, and eventually they'll click on it and watch it, and you get them to watch it. Now you combine that. Now, if you have somebody who's already mentally vulnerable for some reason, maybe they're mentally ill, or maybe they're a veteran who's suffering from PTSD, and then you know that they're using LSD, or they're paranoid as hell because they've been smoking weed all day, and then you put one of these videos in front of them, and they're very open and susceptible to suggestion. In the previous video I just did with my friend from Veterans for Freedom, I pointed out that back in the 1950s, there were studies done where they connected electrodes to the backs of people's heads to study their brain waves while they watched television. And what they found, even back then in the earliest days of TV, is that TV puts people into a state of
like a theta state, like a brainwave state.
That's exactly right. So it's like you're absorbing information, you're just watching. You're just taking it in, and you're not really being that critical about what you're seeing. And the human brain starts to absorb that kind of information in that way around the 18 months of age. So we've been bombarded with this stuff. Now you look at the power of television and the fact that they were studying that even back then in the earliest days of TV. Now what do we have? We have the internet, interactive video. You combine that with all the advances that I'm sure that they've made in developing techniques like MK Ultra mind control, suggestion. See, that's all CIA stuff.
What do you?
Sorry,
I'm just curious. Why do you think they're allowing us to have these tools? Do you think it is on purpose, or do you think the technology is just developed independently of what they can control? I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto?
No, I can't say that I am. No.
I mean, it's very short. It's like one page, but it was written by one of the original cypherpunks who was a role model to Julian Assange. Julian Assange was kind of a young hacker in those days. Yeah. But he said, we're just going to bypass the government by creating technology that can't be controlled, mainly through the use of public key encryption. And I kind of think that this, like what we're doing right now, there are places like just today, we're using this tool, but we're also very conscious of where we can use it, right? There's certain friendly spaces. Rumble seems to be friendly. X seems to be friendly. You can kind of go to the top and like analyze the politics. Okay, these two guys are friends. Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, pretty much behind those two things. But they're also, kind of like techno futurist anarchist types as well. Whereas YouTube, to me, just seems to be the machine, the deep state, the and that's who's laid the tubes. There's a great book on this by it's slipping my mind. He used to work for the Exile, but it's called Surveillance Valley, and it digs into how the internet was born out of the Phoenix program in Vietnam. And from the very beginning of this, it was about surveillance and how to manipulate the population through propaganda. So I found it interesting though from the very beginning. They said he had this image he talked about in Vietnam. They wired the whole jungle with like microphones, and then they networked them all into this giant security center. And they said you'd go and be in the jungles of Vietnam, and you'd walk in, and it'd look like Google's office in Silicon Valley or something. And there were all these, nerds just working in white coats, and they had this big board up that showed the whole, like the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and it would light up where the Viet Cong was. And they said they spent billions on this, and then the Viet Cong just figured out how to they would just throw a can and then they'd napalm wherever they heard the noise. So they, with very cheap tactics, were able to fight back against this billion-dollar infrastructure. And I like to think that that's what Julian Assange figured out, and why they had to lock that dude up, because they've created this to watch us and program our minds. But I try not to get too cynical or lose hope, because if the Viet Cong can figure out how to bring it down, we can too. It's not hopeless, but you're not wrong. It is. And actually, the first person I really heard convinced me that we're living in an information warfare type scenario was Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone. He said that's his main motivation for creating the Gray Zone and doing what he does, because it's not above the board warfare. It probably never was. There's always been black, gray, white propaganda going on, but what do they call it now? A hybrid war.
The thing I think is that I'm seeing though is that they have everybody so discombobulated that we're all actually fighting against each other, thinking that we're fighting for some sort of a solution, when in reality we're self-destructing.
I think so, because people like me and you were being brought closer together. I feel the fact that we've talked to each other 4 or 5 times is a good sign that and the same with my own family members. I have a family member, I was going to tell Lori this, was really getting into all the media I like, right? Listening to Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter was the most interesting one. He was with Scott Ritter 100% until Scott started talking about Israel and how Israel would lose from a military perspective. And then this family member who's listening, I love you, hello. I'd fight that guy in the street, that dirty, he doesn't know his Bible, and you can have your smarty pants, geopolitical, military, whatever, but the good Lord's gonna sort it out, and it's just like, oh man, this is the issue, I'm afraid to, it's weird to me, Rick. We're talking about mass propaganda efforts. I'm not saying it's only the CIA, but I am saying if I was sitting in Langley being like, okay, now the left and the right on alternative media, the kind of anti-authoritarian left and right, whatever that means, the alt left and right are coming together. What dust out, get in the closet. We got an issue that, we've researched. Is there any like golden oldie of division? Let's bring out Israel and Palestine. And I'm not saying that.
But what does the U.S. government have to gain?
What do they have to gain
by
from
creating all this chaos and anarchy in their own country to the point where it undermines the support that Joe Biden has in the White House?
May I say a word?
Sure.
If I could interject on my own show, gentlemen, no fighting in the war room. If I were a Nazi, it's a mental illness, We imported a lot of them into our CIA, into our special security services, into the British security services after World War II. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's a provable fact through actual declassified documents. Let's just say if I were a fascist dictator like, Joe Biden or Justin Trudeau, and I were looking to create a Fourth Reich, what would I do? I would glorify all the tenets of Nazism, except I would do it in such a way that people don't realize what they're being indoctrinated into. That's why I would maybe release a killer virus, and I would make people lock themselves in their homes. I would make them wear masks. I do wonder, those kids that you see out there protesting Free Palestine, why are they all wearing masks outdoors? I mean, I thought we were all over COVID. Are all those kids scared of getting COVID? Almost every single one of them in the crowd had a mask on their face. What's that all about? But if I were looking to do a mass mind control op, an MK Ultra on their minds using this new medium of social media, then, these same kids, a lot of these woke, dumb kids that were out waving the Free Palestine flags in Times Square last night and trashing police cars, they were the same kids that were out marching for BLM in 2020. They were the same ones who believed that vaccines should be mandatory and that the unvaccinated should be excluded from all public places and from society. That's kind of Nazi. And then less than a year later, those same kids were out there waving the blue and yellow Ukraine flags and going, Slava Ukraini. But they didn't realize that they were actually being taught to glorify Nazis. And since we went to war in Ukraine, we're seeing a huge explosion of white nationalism and Nazism and the glorification of the Azov battalion, the struggle against big bad Russia over there, and the Arab cause, the cause of Palestinian liberation. What I'm about to show you is not propaganda. This is actual history. You can go verify it for yourself. But I don't glorify the Banderites because they were Nazi collaborators. I don't glorify the Ukrainian struggle against Russia because I understand that Ukraine is a Nazi nation. And I do not glorify the struggle of Palestinian liberation, not the more radical aspects of it. And here's why.
The Blue Dawn Conference of September 1937 in Syria publicly asserted that the Holy Land question was the concern of all Islam. It was more than a coincidence that the only representative of the world press was that of DNB, the official news agency of Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy provided material and ideas to the Arabs. It was the time of Hitler's rise to power, and his minister of propaganda, Goebbels, sent messengers to Iraq to launch an anti-Jewish campaign. Hitler's Mein Kampf was translated into Arabic and distributed all over the Arab world. The Nazis' final solution to the Jewish problem well suited Amin al-Husseini, Mufti of Jerusalem and president of the Supreme Muslim Council. At a rally in Berlin, he declared, "The Germans know how to get rid of the Jews. We should learn from them." 8 months after Munich, a frightened Britain under Neville Chamberlain restricted Jewish immigration to Israel in exchange for Arab support and Arab oil. Jews from Arab countries could no longer escape to Israel. The borders were sealed. In Iraq, the Arabs had no more need for subtleties. A pro-Nazi government was formed. Nazi swastikas were seen all over the streets, hinting that the time had come to eliminate the Jews. In June 1941, the Jewish quarter of Baghdad was the scene of a massacre. Hundreds of Jews were killed, thousands injured.
But Lori, they say, don't tell them about the history. We're busy trying to rewrite it. We're busy trying to relive it, to repeat it. But Lori, they say, that was a long time ago. The Arabs, they don't believe in that Nazi stuff anymore. They dropped it. They don't really want to kill the Jews. They want to live in perfect peace and harmony with their neighbors. I got to tell you, folks, in Gaza today, in the Palestinian liberation movement today, Adolf Hitler is looked upon as a hero. The Grand Mufti of Palestine, Amin al-Husseini, who was one of the biggest Nazis you've ever seen, is still looked upon as a hero. And today, in Gaza City, of course, with the bombing campaign, I don't know if this place still stands, but there are two, not one, but two clothing stores called Hitler. There's Hitler 1 and Hitler 2, and they cater to the young men of fighting age who go there to get their cool battlefield clothing and their weapons. And if you don't believe me, take a look at this.
اسم المحل هتلر، وانا بحبه يعني من كتر ما هو كان اكتر واحد معادي لليهود، لانه ظلمونا ويعني اخذوا حقنا، كل حقنا اخذوه في البلد، يعني ما خلوناش اشي. يعني احنا الحين بس نروح نموت احسن، احنا عايشين من قلة الموت. وعجبني كمان يعني اللبس، هو احلى حاجة فيه اللبس، والاسم يعني تبعه روعة. لا مكشف.
أنا والله كنت شايف الإعلان هذا على الفيسبوك، أجيت حبيت أشوف المحل لأنه السكينة والكوفية والهذا صار رمز من رموز انتفاضة الأقصى، وحبيت يعني أجي على المحل وأشتري منه، عجبتني يعني الفكرة إنه قسم مساندة مع أهلنا بالقدس والضفة يعني وعجبتني يعني الفكرة كلها.
أنا مارق بدي أشتري أواعي، فلفت انتباهي المحل انه بيعبر عن رمز الانتفاضه في الضفه، ويعني هذه الشغلات مسانده لاهلنا في الضفه، قصه السكين والكوفيه واللتمه، حاجات حلوه تلفت الانتباه، ويعني اشي حلو مميز كمان، حاجات حلوه كتير.
Obviously, I should point out, if you hadn't figured out by now, that video is a couple years old, but not much has changed. The only thing we don't know for sure is if those two stores are still standing. I would guess not. After the recent airstrikes, they're probably a pile of rubble, but that philosophy does live on. And something else people might not know about the Grand Mufti, Amin al-Husseini, was actually a close cousin of Yasser Arafat. After World War II, he was spared prosecution at Nuremberg, evacuated to Egypt under cover of Western intelligence services, and protected for the rest of his life. The PLO And Arafat was mentored at his feet. He taught Yasser Arafat everything that he knows. And I'm telling you that it is relevant. What happened in World War II is still relevant today, perhaps even more relevant than a lot of these stupid young people who don't know history even realize. And, you know, the same woke leftists who were cheering for Nazis in Ukraine are the same ones cheering for Nazis in the PLO and the Hamas liberation movement. And I'm going to show you something funny. Since you're a stand-up comic, I think you'll find this actually kind of funny. I hope you will.
Hi, everyone. We are live on YouTube with Colombia Anti-Semitic News, where everyone is welcome. LGBTQH.
H?
Hamas.
Yeah, I totally sim Hamas.
Yeah.
It's so trending right now.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Do you know why it's true? Because it rhymes. Just look at all this toxic Zionist propaganda. Kidnapped in Gaza. Does this look like Gaza to you?
Yeah, but I have no idea what Gaza looks like.
And they're smiling. Do hostages smile? Zionist liars.
Totally sus.
Do they think we're stupid?
Stupid? I major in queer post-colonial astrology. Ew. Jews make the world dirty.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm racist fluid.
Exactly. And now for a little break from all this activism, we want to say hello to our BFF,
Bestie freedom fighter,
Abu Fatwa in Gaza. Salam alaikum.
Alaykum as-salam, and inshallah, Allah will kill you all infidels.
Thank you so much for joining us. Love the headpiece, the all oppression chic. Very drip.
Mr. Fatwa, how are you? Are you safe?
Oh yes, I'm safe. I'm in a tunnel under the Gaza hospital. Above me, I have Allah and 2 million civilians protecting me.
Community is so important these days.
Do you need like humanitarian aid, food, fuel, medicine?
It's okay, I have everything. I'm only hungry for rockets.
As long as it's organic.
Yeah.
I wish I just could be there with you.
You can. You can come to Gaza anytime, and we will throw you from the roof, you homosexual dirt.
Do you hear? Bro, want to throw me a rooftop party?
They are so welcoming and inclusive.
So shukran. And you are also very welcome to come here to America.
We will come. First, we finish with Israel, and America is next.
Great! So I guess we'll see you soon.
Yes, it will be a blast.
Can't wait. It will be so multicultural.
Ya Allah, you are so stupid.
Thank you so much, Abu. We love you.
I won't even bother killing you. It's a waste of bullets.
Good vibes only.
It's better you just kill yourself.
Okay, bye.
Die.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be Jews free. Yeah, that sounds better.
It is better.
You know, the crazy thing about it is when I hear these white kids out in the streets, all these elite Columbia educated kids in New York City, you know, with from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And then you ask them, well, what happens to the Jews then? And they never have an answer for that one.
Yeah, what
I'm
does
just
that
curious,
actually
Lori,
mean?
what would you say to Max Blumenthal? Like if he was on this stream right now, what would you say to him? Or what would you say to Norm Finkelstein? What would you say to them?
It's really not my
Or Ben
place
Cohen.
to tell a Jew how to feel.
Okay.
I think that Jews have the right to disagree amongst themselves. And I'm not a Jew, so it's not my place to lecture them, but I am a historian. And I'm just pointing out some very troublesome history and some very troublesome facts.
I think we need to set up the Lori Spencer, Norman Finkelstein debate. I think it needs to happen.
Well, you know, if Bobby Kennedy won't debate Max, maybe I'll have to take Bobby's place.
And you know, if I were running the FSB intelligence service in Russia, you know what I would do?
What
I
would
would
you
take
do?
advantage of all this chaos, and I would encourage a lot of what is going on, and fan the flames. And you know what you might end up with? You might end up with Justin Trudeau saying, "Let's take another 500,000 Palestinian immigrants. Let's let's get these people out of there." And who benefits from that? Russia, China, more chaos over here. The woke neoliberal left students will embrace this while they get thrown off the roofs.
Well, you
of
know,
buildings
that's my
here in
point.
Canada.
That's my
right?
point, Rick. And Tyler too. You asked me what I would say to Blumenthal and you know, again, I don't feel that it's my place to lecture a Jew on how they should feel. They're entitled to their feelings. I'm talking to my fellow white people out there.
Okay.
Okay, because I can relate to you where we come from the same place. I'm also
Sure.
a Christian. And you know, and I'm a libertarian. And what I argue to my leftist libertarian friends, I guess, I don't know if Max Blumenthal considers himself a libertarian. I know he considers himself a leftist. But to my fellow Americans, I say, you know, what exactly do you think is cool about Hamas and the Palestine way of life? Because they have no freedom of speech over there. There is no freedom of the press. There are no rights for women. I'm a woman. I find that offensive. There are no rights in their society for gay people, certainly not inclusive and welcoming to all these issues that you claim you stand for. So I'd like to show you a clip of a filmmaker who's recently done a film where he talked to a lot of American leftists in San Francisco about their support for Palestine and actually kind of opened their eyes to some things. And
well, I don't know
I'd like
about
for you
sitting
to
by the
take a
pool
look at
drinking
this one.
pina coladas, but Army Horowitz is back. We haven't seen you for a while, Army. How are you? In New Orleans, I gather. How are you, mate?
Indeed. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me, guys. It's good to be back.
Now, you've been, as always, you make these terrific videos, and the strength of these videos is how you kind of expose what people really think by speaking to the man or woman in the street. This one is one of your very, very best, I have to say, Army. It's superb. We'll play little grabs of it in a moment, but basically, you set out to question the gay community in San Francisco about who they preferred or who they sided with in the Israel-Palestine conflict, and they all sided with Palestine. Have a listen.
Do you tend to side more with one side versus the other?
Palestine. We are here to support the Palestinians and give them a right to freedom and the right to self-sovereignty, and also for Israel to sort of maintain its ground and stay in its own lane without infringing on the journeys of others.
I mean, my ex-wife and I talked about it a lot. That's quite frankly how I learned more about it, but it was really about, like, Israel for being such bullies. And
So, Army, what a great idea. What did you then do?
Incredible and, like, kind of bizarre connection, alliance between the left in general and the gay community specifically and the Palestinians. And on the surface, it makes absolutely no sense, right? They don't share any moral values. In fact, their moral values are in direct conflict with one another, particularly when it comes to gays. So it always vexed me and the pro-Israel community on why that is. Now, ultimately, the reason why it is this notion of intersectionality, the idea that victimhood, and I've always said victimhood is the most corrosive and powerful emotion that humans have, and this proves it, because they say because of our joint victimhood, we are connected and we are allies. And that victimhood overrides even their sense of being, because literally gay people are being murdered and raped by the Palestinians, yet they have avoided that small sticky issue to say that we're together. So what I did was, after I interviewed them, I actually went to the Palestinian territories. I went to the West Bank, not crazy Hamas, right? Not Islamic fundamentalist Hamas, but the quote unquote moderate West Bank. And what I found was, when I was talking to imams, politicians, men in the street, I had the same exact theme to everybody I spoke with. It was somewhere in the spectrum of, on the least offensive, we need to jail and institutionalize these people, to rape and murder them. And that was a spectrum of ideas that I had on what should be done to the Palestinians. And I put that back to these people.
Army, I'll just stop you there, Army, and I'll just show a couple of clips of first you talking to an Islamic preacher in the West Bank, and then I'll play you some of your vox pops where you stopped people, even though your guide told you not to, because he thought it would be too explosive, where you stopped and spoke to people in the streets of the West Bank about gays. So first, here's your Islamic preacher.
What should be done to gay people? الحكم للي بده يمشي في هاي الطريق ويمشي في هاي الطريق يطبق حكم الإسلام عليه للفاعل والمفعول به.
The honor killings with gays. Can you understand why a father would want to kill his gay son?
Because it's not honor for him.
You then also, Army, spoke to a gay Palestinian who obviously didn't reveal his face. It was undercover. Let's have a look at that clip as well.
Like, you know, they have fun. They started, you know, abusing them mentally, abusing them physically. And then, like, after they're like they're done and bored, if they're not interested in sleeping with the guys that they arrested, they just put them to jail.
So he was basically saying that the police, the Palestinian police, who he said are identical to the Palestinian Authority, if they suspect you're gay, first of all, they will arrest you, then they will rape you, and then put you in jail, which is bizarre in itself. So what then happened, Army, after you've done that?
So I did something I normally don't do. I went back to the people that you saw at the beginning of the video, the gay people in San Francisco, and it became a reaction video where they're watching my documentary in real time. And you can see the sea change. You can see them changing their position on this literally as they're watching it. And then when I put it to them afterwards, and I said, well, what do you think now? Who do you support now? Every single person I spoke to changed their.
We've just lost, we've just lost Army there. So, sorry, Army, we've just lost you. But the point Army was making, which is true in the video, and I'll show you in a second, is that everybody he showed, every gay person in San Francisco he showed who previously had supported Palestine, changed their mind simply from watching this. Have a look.
A little bit on the situation?
Yeah, I mean, like, I honestly, I didn't know that was even going on, to be honest. So it made me aware of it.
It makes me wonder if the information that I've learned isn't entirely accurate.
So, Army, we just saw a couple of the people you went back to, and what astonished me, but it was so perceptive, was the guy who said, you know, I think I've been fed the wrong information all these years. So you have highlighted the fact not only of what is happening in Palestine to gays, but also the fact that the left are deliberately deceiving the gay community in the West, correct?
Yes, and I think what the takeaway from this thing is that this is look. When people are less jaded than you think, okay? And when confronted with facts and you have them captured in the sense that they're listening to you, they're watching, you can change people's perceptions once the facts, the true facts, are given to them. And that's what I think is positive about this video, was that you saw these people change their perspective in real time once they saw what was really going on. And like they said, not the left-wing talking points they've been fed and they've believed all these years.
But
so that's the positive I take away.
Army, you had the couple, the woman who said, me and my wife used to discuss this all the time. So obviously there was a level of interest, there was a level of knowledge. How could they be ignorant about the Muslim world's attitude to homosexuality and what oppression that community faces in the Middle East? I mean, how could you possibly have that level of ignorance when you're bold enough to express solidarity with the Palestinian cause? I'm just wondering where this comes from. Like, the level of interest to have an opinion, but then the total lack of knowledge about even the most basic facts.
Rita, welcome to our real world these days. Yes, this is what it's like. Yes, people have very strong positions with absolutely no basis in fact or reality. That's the world that we live in today because we're siloed. And that's, by the way, that's for the, let's be honest, let's be intellectually honest. That's for the left and for the right. We are, in fact, informationally, intellectually siloed, and it is difficult for us to cross-pollinate. And that's, I think, part of the massive problem that we have today in our body politic. That's exactly what the problem is.
Well, I urge people to go and watch this video. It's absolutely superb, and to use it and to show people, show your kids. Army, where can they grab the video?
They can watch it on PragerU.com. They can watch it on my YouTube, PragerU's YouTube. Just, put in Army LGBT and, it'll come up.
Fantastic. Army Horror, it's great to see you. As always, enjoy New Orleans.
Hey, another W for PragerU. If you don't watch PragerU, that's what's beautiful about them. They'll come to you. You just turn your ads off. PragerU, I actually have a long video that I'll play sometimes. And PragerU, thank you for paying me. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for playing on every
a lot of
video
people will say, a lot of people on the left will dismiss that because it's Prager University. Others will dismiss it because he's Jewish, and they'll say, "Well,
taught me a lot.
He's Jewish, so he must be lying, right?" But what I liked about what he said there was that there's not enough cross-pollination of ideas. We are siloed on social media. We're all in our little echo chamber. Like when this conversation began and we asked you, how you formed your beliefs, you said, well, I watched a lot of Max Blumenthal and I
watched a lot of Jews tell me what's going on in Israel.
Yeah. And so that's your silo. And maybe Rick and I, tending to be more conservative or libertarian, more on the right, we're in our silo as well. So, but, as a historian, I tend to take more of a long view of current events, and I look at everything through an historical lens. And what I see happening here is I try to take an objective look at the way Hamas has governed their people since they came to power in 2006. And what I see is a fascist regime. I see that they brought the same ideals that they shared with Nazi Germany in the 1930s and 40s. I see a dictatorship. I see no freedom of the press. There's no freedom of religion. There's no freedom for women. There's no freedom for gay people.
So they're anti-liberal.
Exactly. And
do you believe that Israel helped fund Hamas?
Oh, I know they did. Absolutely.
Okay.
But
why would they do
at the same
that?
time, it's also important to remember who brought Hamas to power in Palestine in 2006. That was President George Bush. And that they had their own strategic geopolitical reasons for letting that happen.
I have a question. So, like, Israel is a liberal place in the Middle East, right? That's
so they say. I don't think it is. I have my problems with it.
Do Palestinians who live in Israel, do they enjoy the same voting rights as Jewish citizens?
It depends on, I don't know. We've recently had guests on the show who are from Israel, who grew up there and even served in the armed forces. And they say it's certainly not perfect, but comparatively speaking, yes, the Arabs in Israel do have at least, some rights. Certainly
from what I've heard, they can't
Hamas.
let them vote, because if they let them vote, it would no longer be a Jewish state. That would be overturned within one election.
You know who?
Have you heard that before?
I've heard that. It's honestly difficult to verify. I'd have to do a deep dive on that, and I promise that we will come back and have this conversation again.
Because that to me is the most incredibly important question. Because my only real world connection to this is I had a friend who was Muslim, who lived in the small town I live in. Her dad was a doctor, internal medicine doctor, and they moved here from Palestine. So she told me she went to visit Palestine when she was 8, and she said at the border that an Israeli guard shoved a machine gun in her face, an assault rifle, and that while she was visiting her family, they shut off the electricity. And so this was in the 2000s, shut off the electricity and the water. So that kind of primed me when I heard things like that, that she'd never lied to me about anything else. She was I think she was like, voted Miss Congeniality in high school. I mean, she was a girl of incredibly high moral character. So do you think that's a true story, or?
Well, I can only answer your question based on what information is publicly known.
Okay.
Since 1949, there have been 100 Israeli Arab members of the Knesset, their government. Currently, there are 10 members of the Knesset who are Arab, and they speak Arabic as their first language, and they vote. They're members of the parliament there. That's a whole nother subject that's extremely complex. But again, getting back to the history of it, when you look at the ideology, and that's the lens that I view it from. The reason that the Grand Mufti and Hitler became allies was because the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Well, Gandhi wrote letters to Hitler, signing him my friend, right?
But did they agree that they should kill all the Jews and kill all the communists? Because those were their shared enemies. These are historical facts. And to this day, granted, alliances have changed. And during the Cold War, Stalin, who was one of the strongest Zionists and supporters of creating the state of Israel, later turned against it.
Yeah.
And allied himself with the Arab cause for liberation. But that's a whole nother discussion for another day.
I'll be honest, Lori, when it comes to that, I have a gut feeling about it, but I'm not Norman Finkelstein, and you should talk to Norman Finkelstein. You should talk to someone who knows this history inside and out and has the opposite perspective.
Oh, I have.
I'm not that person.
I've watched their films. I've read their books. I'm very conversant in their beliefs.
Okay.
But they haven't swayed me to their point of view, because I can't forget the history. I can't forget that the ideology still persists. And
how do you
that's
think
the form
Norman
of government
Finkelstein
they have
can
with Hamas?
look past that with his parents having
I don't
been in
know.
Auschwitz?
I'm not his shrink. I'm not his shrink.
I just really want to see you ask him
That's
that,
between
so I can
Norman
see
and
the
his
answer.
therapist, or his family, or his church.
I mean, if I have to pay money to hear him answer these questions, like, I want to find that film footage that you showed me, and I want to play it for Norman Finkelstein, and ask him, is this true? Like, what
ask
is
him
your
sometime
answer to
about
this?
I would love to hear Max or someone answer, what about the Nazi collaboration? Who was the Grand Mufti, and why do you still think he's a Giga Chad? Why do you think he's a superhero? That's what I'd like to know.
My guess it would have the answer, and I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing the answer would have something to do with, armed Israeli Zionist settlers.
Well, they think the Zionists are the Nazis now. That's what they say. That's literally what they say.
That is exactly what they're saying.
Were there transplant? I mean, would you agree that there were transplants from Europe into that region? Like, were there settlements being set up in the early 20th century before the creation of the state of Israel?
Yep. That's a true fact. That's a true fact.
So they were from Europe, and then they were transplanted in, right?
And you know why?
How would Oklahomans or Missourians react?
We're doing it right now. We're taking in so many immigrants through our southern border. They're flooding into our cities in Texas and Oklahoma, and probably Missouri as well. Every American city is flooded with people who come from different countries, different cultures, different religions. Some may not wish us well.
I just know Americans, and if for some reason there was like a Chinese settlement community in the rural Midwest, then those people would be sympathetic to any anti-Chinese figure. Absolutely.
Well, I can tell you this.
That's
Here
my
in
guess
Oklahoma,
is what's going on.
this is the marijuana farming capital of the United States. And here we have so many Chinese farmers and corporations that are buying up our farmland and developing huge marijuana farms. I'm all for it. I'm a marijuana activist, but there are questions because a lot of these people are in fact involved with organized crime. These farms are illegal. They're unlicensed. And they do have, I mean, we have shootouts all the time between these guys, these organized crime guys from China, and our local law enforcement. When they come to, take the farm out of business, they get met with gunfire. And it's become a very deadly problem here in Oklahoma. So, yes.
Yeah, I always
these
wonder
are
why they're selling it to them. That's always my question. Why is it for sale? You should go to China and try to buy some farmland. See how it works out.
Try to buy some marijuana.
Yeah,
I
try to
doubt
set up a
you'd-
marijuana farm in China.
I don't think they'll let you have a marijuana farm in Palestine either.
Probably not.
Who benefits the most from the massive immigration that is taking place here in the U.S. and especially Canada? Who benefits the most?
I mean, my gut reaction would say, people who want cheap labor would be my guess.
No, it's
You don't think
causing
so?
so much disruption. We can't house them. We don't have the health care for them.
Why would they
have a
come
huge
here if they
homeless
couldn't be
problem.
housed? Like, why would they do that?
Well, Canada has become something of a dumping ground for refugees, it seems. And we're not able to take care of everybody. It's not in the best interests of the people coming here. It's not in the best interests of the people who already live here. I have friends who are new Canadians who have lost faith in the country because they're fed up with all the additional immigration, and they're immigrants who came here just a few years ago themselves. It's gotten that bad. The government just this week announced $1.8 billion in funding to build homes. It's going to take them 2 years just to build 23,000 units. And we're in the next year, we'll have 1.5 million new immigrants come into the country. You do the math. Who benefits the most?
Are they going to be Trudeau voters?
I mean, what do you think?
No,
what is it for? Why are they?
Why? It's we're at war. We are at war. So Canada has this, very open, inclusive, liberal, woke immigration policy. Under Trudeau, we've had massive immigration over the past 8 years, like unprecedented levels. And again, I think that our adversaries just look at this, and I think they're fanning the flames in Palestine. They're like, yes, let's see how many more refugees we can help create. Since they're creating them anyway, let's create even more and flood the West with as many as we can, because the economy can't handle it. Their society, their infrastructure, they can't handle the influx. But Canada says we always say, yes, we'll take. How many should we take? I ask you this: how many is China taking?
China, I don't even think you can become a citizen in China.
Right.
If I lived there for 50 years, I don't think they would let me become a citizen.
How many is
I
India
looked into
taking?
it once. It's I was like, how would you get Chinese citizenship? And it's like,
How
you
many
can't.
Americans is Mexico taking?
This immigration thing, that's just another one of the challenges, the problems that we're being forced to deal with as common people, and even the governments here. It does not benefit our government to take in this many. They'll take them, and I think in the minds of and you have to remember that I don't think Justin Trudeau is acting in the best interests of the country. I think the guy is bought and paid for. He serves several masters. There's clear evidence that he's been working with the Khalistani separatists out of India. So he's beholden to them. The government of India is not happy with him because of it, because those Khalistanis are viewed as terrorists in India. We harbor them in Canada. We protect them by giving them dual citizenship. One of them was just assassinated out in British Columbia. And Trudeau stated publicly that he thinks that the Indian government is directly responsible. This has become an international incident.
The Indian government was trying to assassinate him. Didn't they try to assassinate Trudeau?
His plane was stuck there for about 48 hours, I believe it was. He wouldn't take off because there was some strange mechanical problem with the plane. And they offered to fly him out on another plane. He said, no, thanks. You do the math on that one. Okay.
Do you have, just to feel you guys out a little bit?
I have the receipts on all that.
Me and Lorshek mainly agree. I mean, we come from the same stock. The good capitalist loves migrants to increase the profits by wage dumping, or
there's that aspect to it. But this is so excessive. This is so crazy.
Do you take any credence?
Here in my suburb, we never had homeless people before. They're busing homeless people from Toronto to my small town of Chatham. I live on a cul-de-sac in a suburb. There are homeless people that I find over at the super mailbox thing a half a block from me. They hang out over there in the middle of the night. We have a tent city in my town of 50,000 people that never existed before. We're 3.5 hours from Toronto. They bust them down because they're trying to get rid of them all. You can go to the capital of Canada, Ottawa, go to the McDonald's downtown by the Rideau Center, and there are homeless people laying on the street right in front of the McDonald's. You look up and there's the Parliament buildings. It's out of control.
No, I saw that in DC. I mean, I had to walk over homeless people to go to the White House, and they were sleeping under a Wall Street bank awning, which was
I could go on and on with more and more examples, but this is it's again, who benefits?
That's the question, Rick. Who do you think benefits? Let me ask you your own question.
It's the countries we're at war with, and they're just doing what's in their best interests. They're using information warfare.
Okay,
they are using various strategies to try to disrupt our society.
Who are these countries? Are they Russia, China, Iran? Is that who we're at war with?
Brazil, Russia, India,
the BRICS,
China, South Africa. It's those countries. It's all the allied countries. And then, in very simple terms, it's not that complicated. Look at how the countries are lining up as we get deeper and deeper into the Third World War. Who's on what side? Battle lines are being drawn. Who's aligned with the Palestinians and Hamas? Iran. Who's aligned with Iran? Russia, China. These are the countries that are on that side, and these are the countries that are on that side. Who's with Israel? The United States, NATO. That's who's on the Israeli side. It's not that complicated.
Well, it's our fault. We made enemies of them. They were once our allies and our friends. We were once allies with Iran.
I would say it's our
we were once allies with China and Russia. Our foreign policy is the reason that they are our enemies now.
It's sort of our fault.
It's our own fault.
It is.
For letting our government
NATO expand after the fall of the Berlin Wall. All of these things, it's all true. If we hadn't poked the Russian bear, they probably would have left us alone. But now we're at war, and this is what's going on. And it's not conventional warfare. This is the result.
I guess we might.
It's like Trudeau's like, yeah, we'll take immigrants, and Russia's like, good, take even more. Let's create even more. Flush them out.
Well, I'll tell you this, guys. I'll tell you this, if I may add something. When you look at our southern border, and I live pretty damn close to it, and I spent 25 years in South Central Texas. What we're seeing at our border now, we've had a border crisis for 30 years, but this is different. These aren't the usual people that we would see coming across our border. Usually they were, Mexican families coming here to work hard and be good citizens and seek a better life for themselves. But when we look at our border now, when you really look, you see some women and children, but they're not in the majority. What you see are young, strapping, healthy young men from other countries all over the world of fighting age. Now, when you take a look at some of these protests we've seen the past week, and you see these huge protests where the cops, I mean, you look at what happened at Grand Central last night. They had the cops surrounded. They had the cops backed up against the wall. They were completely outnumbered. Had that crowd gone to full riot mode, which it felt like they were pretty close to doing, the cops would have been powerless to stop it. Last week in London, some cops were, like kind of caught on a hot mic. Somebody caught them, surrounded by this huge crowd. And they were like, we're outnumbered. We're sitting here with a taser. That's all we've got against an army. My question is, are they building an army? And we played a clip earlier from last night's protest in Times Square when they were marching to Grand Central. Rick, did you see the lady carrying the sign that said, overthrow the United States government, overthrow the government of America, spelled with KKKs, right? America. They seem to be in the mood to overthrow our government, to overthrow our democracy. And with these numbers getting larger and larger and these crowds getting
Lori,
angrier
you're a
and angrier.
libertarian, Lori.
I am.
Thank
I
yourself,
am.
Lori. You're a libertarian. What are you
And
talking
I
about?
love my Constitution. I love my country. I don't like the people we've elected to this government who are crooked as hell.
What did their
But
signs
I
say,
don't
though?
want to have my government overthrown, sir. I like my government. I like democracy. And I want to restore our democracy, not overthrow it or destroy it. If you
think we
think that's
live
where
in a
I'm coming from,
democracy?
you've got me wrong. I believe we no longer live in the democratic republic that our founders gave us. Like Ben Franklin said, it's a republic, madam, if you can keep it. And we haven't done a very good job of keeping it. We have let this happen. Now, I'm angry too. I want to take my country back. I do not want to destroy it. And I don't want to overthrow the government.
I don't want to destroy it either, but I think the way you save it is to create a new government. And
What do you mean by a new government? A new system or a new elect a new government?
We're living in.
You mean throw
that's
out
what I
the
believe.
Constitution, throw out the Bill of Rights, and replace it with
I
what?
hear people say it all the time, but what do you mean by that?
What would you replace it with?
I would replace it with, well, you could very easily the CPI 4-point plan. That's what we want, right? What is
I
the
like
CPI?
your 4-point plan.
Well, I
I've
don't
read
think
it. I like
I
it.
don't think this government would ever allow that 4-point plan to exist. If it will,
No.
I would love to do it. But if it won't, I think it would be a better country if those 4 things were true. And
But you can achieve those 4 things, Tyler, without overthrowing the government or taking up arms.
How?
Elect good people who agree with you.
Okay.
That's how you do a peaceful revolution.
I just feel like we live in a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and the candidates that they let run are pre-selected. They're not going to let you get a candidate that lets you have one of those 4 things. It's just
what ultimately, what kind of government do we end up with this 4-point plan? What is that? Is that a
people's
democracy?
government is what I would call it. Yeah, I'd
Is
call it more democratic than what we live in today.
Well, what
I
do you
would
mean
say
by
so.
that? Do people get to vote in this?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so what is it?
Tyler, do you happen to have the 4-point plan handy where you could read it to us?
Yeah, I can read it.
I've
to
heard
you.
it, but I'm not sure Rick has.
CPI USA.
To me, it sounded pretty reasonable. I just don't think you have to overthrow the government to achieve it.
So a 4-point plan to rescue the country, a mass mobilization to rebuild the country, put millions of unemployed to work at union wages, get them to rebuild roads, bridges, water treatment facilities, power plants, high-speed rail should connect the country. You should have public ownership of natural resources like oil, natural gas, coal, timber. Public control of banking. So you should make Wall Street illegal. The heights of banking should be controlled by the people. And an economic bill of rights, just like FDR wanted the right to a job, housing, education,
You're going to
healthcare.
nationalize the banks, nationalize the resource industries. What was the first one? That was public works projects.
Yep,
to put
mass
people
public
back to
works
work.
project. Yep, that's what I think. How do you pay
And
for
what was
number
What was
one?
the fourth? What was the fourth one?
An economic bill of rights. So you should, in the Constitution, you should have the right to a job, right to housing, right to education, right to healthcare.
Now, when we discussed your 4-point plan in the past, and we talked about it, you and me and Caleb, at some length, the way that you put it to me was that your goal was not to throw out the Constitution, but rather to amend it or to pass legislation to that effect, an economic bill of rights. If you want to nationalize the industries, that we would go through the democratic process, and we, the people as a collective, would then decide that's in the best interest of the country. We choose that. That is what the people want, rather than it being forced on them through, a merry band of revolutionaries who overthrew the government and said, here's the New Deal, whether you like it or not, folks.
A real communist revolution is hyper-populism. So it is from the bottom up, creating the top. That's what I think.
I mean,
So
I agree with you on a lot of those points.
I mean, we're in semantics. Do you throw out
Yeah.
the Constitution? Do you write a new one from scratch, but keep everything that's in there and add the part at the end as an amendment? You could do that. I just don't think the power structure that's running this country and getting us in endless wars is going to let that happen, because I think their main prerogative is to privatize the natural resources.
Well, I tell you what.
Would you say that? I mean, would you say that, Lori? Like, that's a question.
Would I say what?
Someone asked it earlier. Like, do you believe like Israel is being? Do you agree that the U.S. needs the aircraft carrier known as Israel for its empire games? Do you believe it needs Israel to control the world's oil supply?
Do I believe that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think we have the right to take anyone else's oil.
Okay. Do you think if we completely pulled the American military out of Israel, do you think Israel could defend itself?
No, I don't.
So do you think a country can be...
Because they're surrounded by enemies who hate them and want to kill them, and say quite openly, from the river to the sea.
Why did they pick there to live if that is true?
Why did they pick there? They weren't really given a choice.
Okay.
I mean, the British said there were all these different plans, right? In the late 19th, early 20th century, where will the Jews go? They need a homeland where they can be safe. They wanted to live in the Holy Land. They felt that they had a claim to it.
It doesn't
the
sound
British,
like the plan worked out very well.
It didn't. It was a horrible mistake.
Sounds like the most
British.
dangerous place you could live now as a Jew is in Israel.
Yeah, I would probably have to agree with you on that
That's
one.
what a lot
the
of
question is, and nobody can answer it, where the hell do they go? And I know that we're almost out of time and we've gone way over time, but
I mean, I've heard Jews say that they try to be the best citizens they can be where they do live.
Yeah, that's a lot of them do believe that. They've tried to set up a bastion of democracy, as they say, in the Middle East, and that they brought improvement to the land.
Like
what was once a desert is now, an amazing.
I just don't know. Like
country.
Syria, like Jesus spoke Aramaic, right? But if I tried to turn Syria into a Christian ethno-state, I would imagine I would live in perpetual war with the Muslim countries surrounding me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you what, I think the best way to bring this show to a close is I think that I found this wonderful clip. It's actually, I thought I would give your fellow Missourian the last word, President Harry Truman, since he's the one responsible for creating this whole mess back in 1948. These are some outtakes, and the public did not see them until just a few years ago. Right after Israel was created, literally the same day, President Truman made some informational films to explain to the American people why Israel had to be created and why the United States supported it. And these outtakes are so fascinating because you hear some very candid reflections here on it that's not what you'd expect from President Truman, which is probably why the Truman Library kept them hidden for the better part of half a century. But I think he explains the whole mess maybe better than anybody could. But you've probably never seen these before. I just want to show you. It's a couple minutes
We had
long.
several other
really fascinating
people
stuff.
in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased. We had all sorts of objections to everything that was done. Something had to be done. We went ahead and done it and had it done, and now it's working out. Eventually, I think we'll have them all satisfied, but it's going to take a great deal of time yet to get the job done.
Could you tell us that they were worried about war with the Arabs?
I also antagonized a lot of people by recognizing the state of Israel as soon as it was formed.
1949.
But don't think that decision to recognize Israel was an easy one. I had to make a compromise with the Arabs and divide Palestine. The Jews wanted to chase all the Arabs into the Tigris and Euphrates River, and the Arabs wanted to chase all the Jews into the Red Sea. And what I was trying to do was to find a homeland for the Jews and still be just with the Arabs. But when you go into a thing of that kind, the people you help most are the ones that get most angry with you.
Ain't that the truth?
Before we go, Lori, I
Yeah.
want to ask you: do you believe that the well, here, Rick, the CIA? Do you believe the CIA was created out of the Wall Street lawyers for the oil industry?
For the
Is that
oil
the history
industry?
that you understand? Wasn't Dulles like
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget that guy we just looked at, President Truman.
Right.
He's the one who created the CIA, the NSA, and the National Security State, and the State of Israel. So make of that
That's
what
just
you
to
will.
me, the intelligence agencies, it's about controlling natural resources, specifically oil. And I put the hat back on, Rick. I really think that's what's behind all this.
Is that thing made of tinfoil?
No, it needs to be. I keep those in the classroom. I got 2, so I got one with an easy reach. If some kid asks me like who really killed JFK, I can put it on real
Put
fast.
it on.
Yeah. Or they're not even interested in that anymore. They're just like,
I think it's safe to blame the CIA for that one, for JFK.
Well,
yeah.
It's like issues like this, like Grandpa, despite everything, I got to take my hat off to him. In the end times, there'll be wars and rumors of wars, and brother will be divided against brother. And this is an issue I know we're not going to agree 100% on, but at the
It's
end of the day,
okay.
I still love you guys. And,
Exactly.
I think there's things we can still work on together. And like I always tell you, Rick, when the bullets start flying, me and you will be in the foxhole together. I like to think so. Okay.
Absolutely.
I got your back, man.
I always remember the Jew Jesus taught me to love my neighbor as myself. And Rick and Lori are my neighbors, and ain't no geopolitics 10,000 miles away gonna make me quit loving 2 people that I know in real life. So at the end of the day, that's how I feel.
You. That's
Good.
how we feel about you too, Tyler. We just adore you. We know you're good people. And good people can always disagree about things, and
Absolutely.
we debate, we try to change each other's minds. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. And I think we're all a condition of our time and place,
Yeah.
and what we've learned and how we were raised, and that's kind of where this conversation started. And sometimes we evolve and we change our mind from the way that we were raised, and the things that we were brought up to believe, because we do some research and think for ourselves.
That's
And
right.
I'm always open to having my mind changed. I'm open to being persuaded, and that's why I love this show. I love doing this show, and I love cross-pollination. I like talking to people from the other side and hearing what they have to say. But the great thing about you and Caleb and my friends at CPI is we agree on most things. We disagree on some things, but it's always a healthy conversation. And most of all, we're not afraid to have that conversation. We don't just hit the block button and say, well, you don't agree with me, so obviously you support genocide and baby killing, or you're a Nazi and I can't talk to you, and all conversation goes away. And we're
That's
never going
true.
to get anywhere if we can't talk to each other. So I like that you can have a reasonable debate like an adult.
Yeah.
And instead of just, being a child and saying, "Wah, unsubscribe, I'm going to
No, I'll
block
listen.
you. I
I'll
don't want to
listen.
listen to you." I like my echo chamber and I don't want to be challenged.
Nope. I always want to hear it all, and then I'll go away and look into it and try to figure out what I think about it.
Yeah,
That's how it
And
is.
I want to issue a warning based on what you just said, and that is to everyone out there: make sure that you don't leave your mind so open that you are left vulnerable, because we may not just be a condition of our time. I think that it's pretty obvious that we are being conditioned in our time, and we need to be aware of that so that we continue to think clearly.
Yep. And I think holding anything I hear up to the mirror of does this help me love my neighbor as myself is a great way to not fall down any destructive rabbit holes. And with that in mind, Grandpa, if you're listening, Dad especially, I love you, buddy, no matter what happens. Thanks for tuning in. And I
I
love you.
love that your family tuned in. Some of your students tuned in. That's awesome, Tyler. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Hopefully
Well,
they let me
gentlemen,
have a
thank
good
you.
long teaching career. We'll see how it goes. If not, you can find me at Walmart Pharmacy, although that might go by the wayside as well. Who knows? Get one of them Rumble contracts.
You never know out in rural Missouri how your comments might be interpreted.
You never know.
But I hope that doing this show doesn't cost you anything
Nope.
other than a couple of hours of your time.
It's going to live off Dogecoin, My Hail Mary pass.
Well, I love you, Tyler. And gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me tonight here on Strange Bedfellows. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched. I hope that you found it challenging. Maybe you found it maddening at times. Maybe you'd like to, destroy your phone after some of the things you heard spoken by all three of us tonight. I don't know who you agree with or who you disagree with. You can let us know in the comments.
I don't even agree with me.
It's just like Thanksgiving. I roll my eyes, I talk under my breath, and then I give you a hug and I go home.
And I bite my tongue till it bleeds,
That's
man.
right. And you got on your side, you just go, these kids, God, how do they feed themselves?
These kids today. I'll tell you what. But thanks again, everybody. We'll see you back here next Saturday night at 9:00 Eastern. Till then.
All right. Peace. Thanks.
In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.